Chapter 1658. It was the 6th year of Taikong. It was a chilly spring. Spring had arrived in the south of Yonghua, but the northern border was still snowing. The snow was up to his ankles. Nie Yang thought that after death his soul would return to the netherworld. He would walk on the bridge of helplessness, drink Mengpo's soup, forget the past and be reborn. In the end he was still too young. Nie Yang was the legitimate son of the Nie family's third branch. Although he was not valued by his elders, he was well-dressed and had never suffered. He was sent to Jiangpingji by Nie Qing to die. He only had time to say his last words before he was decapitated. He felt a chill on his neck. After some time he regained consciousness. Not only was his neck cold but his limbs were even colder. It was as if he was in an ice cave. He struggled to open his eyes and saw the broken roof of the house. When he turned his eyes he saw that the room was pitch black. Nie Yang was shocked. He was surprised that hell was like this. He used all his strength to push himself up from the bed. He was shocked. Underneath him was a bed made of dried grass and firewood. His body was covered with something black and smelly. His hands, which were exposed from his sleeves, were cracked and frostbitten. Not only that, but he also found that his feet were bare. His ankles and soles were blue from the cold. Could it be that Lord Lanting was so stingy that he didn't even leave clothes for me? Nie Yang murmured. As soon as he said it, he was shocked by his own voice. In his previous life, Nie Yang's voice was not as elegant as Nie Qing's, but it was full of youthful vigor. What about now? He sounded like he was about 6 or 7 years old. Although his voice was hoarse, it could not hide his childishness. At that moment, Nie Yang realized that his limbs had shrunk. He used all his strength to get up. From the corner of his eyes he saw white snow outside the broken window. He could vaguely see well-dressed people walking by. Nie Yang was at a loss for a while. He panicked and realized that the situation was different from what he had imagined. Could it be, this isn't hell? When Nie Yang tried to go out he felt a sharp pain in his head. An unfamiliar and slightly blurry memory filled his brain. It really isn't hell. After a long while, Nie Yang revealed a shocked and panicked expression. He looked like he was about to cry but he wasn't. He was at a loss. Nie Yang died at the hands of Jiangpingji. After his death his soul did not return to the underworld. Instead he was reborn in a completely unfamiliar dynasty. This body was that of a beggar. His parents died of famine and he relied on stealing and the support of kind-hearted people to survive. Life was so difficult. The child beggar tried his best to survive, but he was still frozen to death by the sudden snowfall last night. When he woke up again his inner core had become Nie Yang. Of course he was happy to be reborn but in this situation he might as well die. Nie Yang sneered, "You've done so much evil in your life but you still have a chance to start over." Ha, this God. He really didn't know if God was treating him well or torturing him on purpose. This body was that of an orphan with no parents, no name and no family. He was penniless and had no home. He was frozen to death in this broken temple. The people nearby called him dog, and the children called him fool. With such a terrible life, if he didn't have the opportunity he would probably never be able to turn over a new leaf. Nie Yang was, after all, an ancient person. His thinking was more inclined to believe that this beggar was actually his reincarnation. But for some reason the soup of Mingpa didn't work, and it made him remember his previous life. According to this line of thinking his current life situation could be explained. He had done so much evil in his previous life so there was no glory or wealth in his next life. He could only live a poor life. Nie Yang's lips curled into a somewhat mocking sneer. In his previous life he had been born into a gentry family and was the son of a respectable noble family. Now he was a beggar. Even if he worked hard at most he would be ranked among the poor and people would look down on him. Thinking about it this way he felt indignant. However, it was too early to think about this. He had to solve the problem of food and warmth first. Nie Yang thought about it and followed his memory to the only private school near the village. The examination system in this world was not quite the same as the evaluation system he knew. It was the imperial examination to select scholars. The form of the imperial examination was somewhat similar to the teaching and promotion system implemented by the Duke of Lanting in Wanzhou. However, fortunately, it was the imperial examination and not the evaluation system. Otherwise, Nie Yang would never be able to climb up in this lifetime. The evaluation of scholars was based on family background and appearance. Talent was actually secondary. Nie Yang's identity in this life was only a beggar. He couldn't even be considered poor. Just based on his family background, he would forever be rejected from officialdom. He still had a chance in the imperial examination to select scholars. Nie Yang endured the cold and hunger and secretly peeked outside the window of the private school. He caught a glimpse of the content of the teacher's lecture and felt a bit more satisfied. Although the history of this dynasty was very different from what he knew, the characters in both were the same. Nie Yang didn't have to be illiterate anymore. The private school teacher also noticed the beggar outside the window but didn't pay much attention. This beggar often came over to pick up the students' leftovers. He looked very pitiful, so the teacher would occasionally soften his heart and give him alms. The teacher randomly tested a few students on yesterday's homework. Every student stuttered, which made him very disappointed. At this time he heard a murmur outside the window. He listened carefully and didn't miss a single word. He looked again and saw that it was the beggar. "Do you know how to recite?" the teacher asked. Nie Yang was secretly happy, but he said, "I remember everything just now." The teacher was slightly surprised and asked with interest, "Then what else can you recite?" Nie Yang opened his mouth and recited the few analects of Confucius that the teacher said today. It was strange that Confucius and Mencius were still alive in a strange dynasty. "How stubborn," the teacher murmured. "How smart. What a pity. If he had money to go to school and receive education, he might even be able to pass the imperial examination. Unfortunately, he was a beggar who didn't know his next meal. No matter how talented he was, it would only be a waste." Nie Yang showed his doubts and asked the teacher about his confusion about one of the analects of Confucius. The teacher smiled indifferently. "What confusion can you have? It was good enough that he could recite it word for word. How could he have his own opinion? If it was the previous beggar, he probably couldn't. But Nie Yang was different. In terms of talent and learning, 10 teachers together might not be a match for Nie Yang. But Nie Yang was born in a noble family in his previous life. The educational resources in front of Nie Yang were the best at that time. He received an elite education and never lacked writing brushes, ink and paper. The teachers were all famous scholars and he could read the rare books of the poor. Not to mention that Nie Yang was talented. Even if he was stupid, with so many educational resources he would be much better than the ordinary poor. The teacher in front of him had studied hard for more than 10 years and failed several provincial examinations. He was discouraged and came back to teach. Nie Yang's acting skills were beyond doubt. Even if he was at a disadvantage, he could still create the most suitable opportunity. The teacher was shocked after hearing this. Nie Yang said again, "I can do all kinds of dirty and tiring work. Teacher, please do me a favor and give me something to eat." The teacher frowned. This is not a charity hall. Although he didn't look down on Nie Yang, the strong sarcasm in his words could be heard by anyone who wasn't deaf. Nie Yang had always been a smiling tiger in his previous life. All his emotions were hidden deep in his heart and no one could see them. He knew how to prioritize things. Right now, survival was the most important thing and he could still endure this little bit of setback. "Although I'm not talented, I know shame." Nie Yang lowered his posture and said word by word, "If you have any work like copying and engraving, I can do it. So cold now. If I don't find a way out, I'm afraid I won't be able to survive until spring." Nie Yang had a good eye for people and the teacher in front of him had a good reputation in the surrounding villages. He could play the emotional card. Sure enough, the teacher heard Nie Yang's words and asked him, "You can copy and engrave?" Nie Yang nodded and showed his 2 frostbitten hands. He said awkwardly, "I can write. I used to secretly watch the teacher teach and practiced with a branch for a long time. But my hands are a little hard from the cold. If I write with a pen, I'm afraid it won't look good." The teacher looked down at Nie Yang's hands. They were almost black from the cold. The cracks and frostbites made people feel sorry for him. Thinking of this, he felt pity for him. If this child could really copy well, it would be fine to give him some food to eat. Words were no proof. Even if the teacher was a kind person, he would not believe Nie Yang's words. He still had to test his handwriting. The teacher did not think that a child who had not gone through systematic learning could write well. Nie Yang felt relieved when he saw the teacher's attitude soften. He endured the pain and washed the stains off his hands and arms with ice and snow. Then he rolled up his sleeves and started writing so that the table, paper and pen would not be dirted. Nie Yang's attitude was sincere and kind. The teacher liked him a lot. Nie Yang's handwriting was good. After all, he was a student of a famous calligrapher. It was just that he had changed his body and his wrist strength was not good enough. He could not write as well as he did in his previous life. Even so, the teacher was still shocked. Nie Yang was from an aristocratic family. He was best at writing two types of characters. One was the popular Wan Ti in Zhongzhou, and the other was the Mot. These two types of characters were created by Zhongzhou's modern calligrapher. The person who created the Wan Ti was a woman from an aristocratic family. At that time, the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women had not been created. Women from aristocratic families had a high status. This lady's handwriting was charming and graceful. Many noble ladies followed her example. Many young aristocratic families who pursued fashion also liked to copy and learn. Nie Yang was also a fan. His Wan Ti was more charming than many women's. The calligrapher who created the Mot was Nie Yang's teacher. At the same time, it was also the character that Nie Yang wrote the most. This type of character was famous for being thick, square, and clear. Nie Yang studied the Mot to hide his true nature. After all, people said, calligraphy is like the person. One could see a person's nature through his calligraphy. Reality proved that this was nonsense. Nie Yang had learned 70% of his teacher's Mot. Outsiders thought that he was a gentleman. Who knew that he was a scheming villain? At this time, the calligraphy was naturally Nie Yang's best Mot. Did you really practice it yourself? The headmaster looked at Nie Yang with a complicated expression. He did not know that this beggar had such a talent. He had almost been buried. Nie Yang nodded and twisted his fingers pitifully. He said pitifully, I beg the headmaster of the academy to do me a favor and let me have a meal. The headmaster sighed. Forget it. I'll leave the copying and engraving to you. 2 meals a day. Is that okay? Nie Yang smiled. Thank you, headmaster. If I have a chance in the future, I will not forget your kindness. A chance in the future? The headmaster smiled and waved his hand. It's not that simple. Take care of yourself first. Why did Nie Yang set the private school as his goal? Because he needed a way out. He was not willing to be an ordinary person. If he did not work hard to find a way out, would he freeze to death or starve to death in the ruined temple? The private school had some books. Nie Yang helped here. He could read the books and understand the details of this era. He could also solve the problem of food and clothing. He looked at the rice paper on the table and sighed in his heart. Although there was paper in his previous life, it was very precious and produced in small quantities. Many small gentry families could only use thick bamboo slips to carve words. At this moment, even a scholar from a poor family who taught in a private school could use such uniform and fine paper. It could be seen that the overall standard of this era was much better than in his previous life. His hands and feet were itchy and painful from frostbite, but Nie Yang did not seem to feel it. He began to copy as usual. At first he was not used to it. After a whole afternoon he was much faster. After a while, the headmaster brought him a set of clothes that had been washed white. There were 2 wooden boxes on the clothes. You can wear this set of clothes. There is also some ointment for frostbite. The headmaster asked him, do you have a place to stay? I'm living in a ruined temple 3 miles away. That ruined temple is drafty. What's the difference between living there and living in the open? The headmaster frowned. A ruined temple could not keep out the wind and rain. Living there would be courting death. If you don't mind, you can stay in the woodshed. We'll decide when the weather gets warmer. Nie Yang's eyes showed gratitude. He said sincerely, thank you, headmaster. From that day on, Nie Yang lived in the woodshed of the private school peacefully. During the day he diligently copied the books that the headmaster borrowed from everywhere. At the same time he secretly recorded the contents of the books. The headmaster provided 2 meals a day, but the portions were always sufficient. Unknowingly it was March. One day school ended. The headmaster went to the town to run some errands. Nie Yang did not have any tasks, so he lay in the corridor and took a light nap. When he opened his eyes, the sky was already red. The headmaster sat beside him and looked at him. You've been here for more than a month, but I still don't know your name. Nie Yang said, my surname is Nie and my first name is Yang. His parents died early in this life and they did not have time to choose a name. Nie Yang did not know their surnames, so he simply used the surnames of his previous life. Nie Yang. There are many Westerners. The river is vast and it flows northward. The headmaster smiled. It's a wonderful scene. After a pause, the headmaster asked him, do you have any other family members? Nieyong was startled and shook his head. No, he was already alone and deserted by everyone. How could he have any other family members? When I heard you murmuring Nye Qing in your dream, I thought it was your living relative. The headmaster said regretfully, you're very talented. If your family is willing to support you in your studies, you can still have a future in the officialdom. Even if you don't bring glory to your ancestors, at least you won't have to worry about food and clothing. When the headmaster said the two words, Nye Qing, Nye Yang's face turned completely white without any color. Ever since he woke up, he had been busy making a living. In the dead of night, he restrained himself from thinking about his previous life. Who would have thought that he was actually talking in his sleep? What's wrong? Do you feel uncomfortable? Thank you for your concern, headmaster. I'm fine. It's just that I suddenly thought of my cousin and felt very sad. Chapter 1659. Spring left and autumn came and winter and summer changed seasons. On the outside, Nieyong looked like a young child, but on the inside he was an adult with deep schemes. He helped the headmaster manage the private school while absorbing the knowledge of this era like a whale sucking in a dragon. The headmaster saw it but did not stop him. He even gave Nieyong some advice occasionally. In his eyes, Nieyong was destined to be an extraordinary person. If he had a good future, he would also benefit. When Nieyong was 10 years old, the headmaster suggested him to try his luck by participating in the county-level exam. The county-level exam was divided into 3 stages: the county exam, and the academy exam. If he passed, he would receive food from the government every month. Even if he could not go further, he would still be much better than an ordinary person. Nieyong said humbly, I don't have a good foundation. I'm afraid I won't pass. The headmaster said, the county-level exam is not as difficult as you think. With your current foundation, you should be able to pass. Participating in the county-level exam required complicated procedures. The headmaster told him to focus on his revision and ran around to complete all the procedures. Nieyong watched from the side with an indescribable sense of melancholy. Whether it was Nye Qing or this teacher, they did not know what kind of bullshit the real Nieyong was. The headmaster lent Nieyong some money and gave him a lift to participate in the county-level exam. As the headmaster expected, the county-level exam was not difficult. It was not a challenge for Nieyong at all. He passed the first exam and became a gifted student. At the same time, he became the youngest in that year and was known as a genius. Nieyong's life improved a lot since he was a gifted student. He stayed in the private school to make a living and spent more time studying every day. After preparing for the exam for several years, Nieyong took the autumn county exam at the age of 16 and passed the top scorer. Then he took the spring exam and passed the top scorer. He performed very well in the palace exam, and the emperor wanted to help him pass 3 top scorers in a row. Thus, Nieyong was promoted to the top scorer. He passed 3 top scorers in a row before he was 20. Suddenly, Nieyong's social status rose and many people tried to rope him in. Outsiders all thought that Nieyong would become arrogant because of this. Who would have thought that this little Zhuangyun would be able to keep his composure and conduct himself with the demeanor of a great family? If he was thrown into the crowd of nobles in the capital just by looking at his temperament, it would be hard to tell that Nieyong was once a beggar. He would look more like a naturally born rich noble. Nieyong didn't get carried away because he knew very well that being the top scholar was only an entrance ticket to the officialdom, not a ticket to the finish line. How high he could climb in the future and how much power he could control all depended on his future management. At the Jasper Forest banquet, many people wanted to see what this Zhuangyun, who had yet to reach the age of 20, looked like. Nieyong wore a clear and harmless smile on his face as he walked among the nobles with ease. His every movement didn't seem like that of a bookworm who had studied hard, but more like that of an experienced official. Before the court examinations, Nieyong had tried his best to gather information about the situation in the court. The current emperor's surname was Nye. He was 32 years old when he ascended the throne in the first year of Taikong. He had 5 sons and 3 daughters. The first 4 princes had already reached adulthood. Only the 5th prince, who was also the crown prince born by Empress Yuan, had yet to reach adulthood. Counting them, he was half a year older than Nieyong. A few years ago, Empress Yuan had died of illness. The emperor had the intention of suppressing Empress Yuan's paternal family, the the Duke of Zhengua. In addition, the 4 older princes had entered the court one after another after coming of age. There was a faint tendency to surround and attack the crown prince. The crown prince was only the heir to the throne of the empire. His privileges were only one level lower than the emperor's. However, he was still not the emperor and his life was in danger. Nieyang had a faint smile on his face. In his heart he was calculating which prince had the upper hand. However, his calculations still fell through when he heard the name of the crown prince. Nieching. It was actually Nieching. Nieyang was very surprised. His hand trembled and wine spilled out. After the Jasper Forest banquet began, the emperor, the crown prince, and the other 4 princes appeared one after another. Nieyang's expression changed over and over again. There was no other reason. The crown prince's face, figure, manner of speech and temperament were almost identical to his cousin Nieching from his previous life. The difference was that his cousin Nieching was a bright and elegant scholar. Like the bright moon, he always had a faint smile on his lips. His every move was a role model for nobles. The crown prince in front of him was indeed similar, but there was a faint hint of melancholy between his brows. Nieyang suppressed his wildly beating heart and kept his breathing steady. However, he could not bear to look away from the crown prince. Why were they so similar? Could it be that the crown prince was the reincarnation of his cousin Nieching? That was also possible. Nieching was born rich and did not do evil. It was reasonable for him to be reincarnated into the imperial family and become the crown prince. Nieyang swallowed nervously. His hands hidden in his sleeves were sweating profusely. His fingers were almost twisted into a ball. "Cousin," Nieyang murmured, his eyes welling up with tears. The others only thought that he was young and could not hold his liquor. After a few teasing words, they turned their attention to the ranking Ai and Tanhua. In the middle of the Jasper Forest banquet, Nieyang caught a glimpse of the crown prince getting up to leave. He found an excuse to follow but was blocked by someone. "Why is the top scholar here?" The crown prince revealed a suspicious look, but the vigilance in his eyes made Nieyang instantly sober. He was not Nieching. No, it should be said that he was not the Nieching he knew. Nieyang's heart raced, but he showed an embarrassed expression. He lowered his head and said in a low voice, I can't hold my liquor. I drank a little too much just now, but I couldn't find a place to change, so I couldn't ask, so, Your Highness, please forgive me for my lack of manners." The crown prince's expression eased. This was also Nieyang's fault for looking so harmless that people could not raise their guard. Perhaps it was an ill-fated fate, but Nieyang looked exactly the same in this life as in his previous life. He naturally knew how to show his harmless side. The crown prince's expression eased after hearing this, and he called for a palace maid to lead the way for Nieyang. As Nieyang watched him leave, an indescribable feeling welled up in his heart. He owed so much in his previous life, could he pay it all back in this life? After the Jasper Forest banquet, Nieyang was appointed to the Hanlin Academy as a secondary class 6th rank. He was in charge of the nation's history, compiling records and recording the emperor's words and deeds. Simply put, he was a secretary. This position was considered a high starting point for Nieyang, who had a poor background. If he did not work hard, he would probably squat in this position for the rest of his life. If he did well and won the emperor's favor, then the role and power of this position would not be small. In fact, there were records of top scholars in the past who were secondary class 6th rank for their entire lives. The imperial examinations were just a ticket. After entering this officialdom, how high one could climb in the end depended on one's own ability. Nieyang smiled and narrowed his eyes, not worried about his future at all. Even though Nieching said his temperament was not good, he had to admit that only people with this kind of temperament could do well in the officialdom. In comparison, he was more concerned about the crown prince. "Nieching," Nieyang murmured, a trace of determination flashing in his eyes. Regardless of whether this crown prince was the reincarnation of his cousin, he had to help him ascend to the throne. This way, perhaps they would not owe each other anything. Nieyang's temperament was born for officialdom. In other words, he was born for this bowl of rice. In just half a year, he had seen through the emperor's thoughts and became a trusted official of the emperor. His future was limitless. The nobles in the court tried to rope in this new noble, and the 4 adult princes also tried to extend an olive branch to him. Nieyang did not refuse, nor did he give a definite answer. He obediently did his job. Because he had become a Hanlin Academy scholar, Nie Yang and the Crown Prince had more opportunities to meet. Because they were close in age, they had more topics to talk about than others, and they could occasionally talk. After some contact, Nie Yang had a deeper understanding of the Crown Prince's position. In short, it was not optimistic. Empress Yuan was dead, his mother's family was continuously suppressed, the 4 older royal brothers were pressuring him step by step, and the emperor's attitude towards the Crown Prince was becoming more and more ambiguous. In such a situation where he was besieged on all sides, not to mention this Crown Prince, anyone else would be forced to become irritable. Nie Yang waited for the Crown Prince to recruit him, but after waiting for half a year, the Crown Prince did not even let out a fart. He really could not wait any longer, so Nie Yang took the initiative to attack, hinting that there was a problem with Nie Qing's camp. The Crown Prince was dazed for a moment, then smiled warmly. I heard that Zhou Yi had refused 4 royal brothers in succession. This solitude was curious and guessed that Zhou Yi had other plans, such as wholeheartedly loyal to imperial father. I did not expect that Zhou Yi would like this solitude. This solitude's current situation will disappoint you. The Crown Prince was the heir to the throne and was outstanding in all aspects. In Nie Yang's view, he was no different from his own cousin. If not for the surrounding scene reminding him, he would have thought that the 2 of them had returned to their previous life. Nie Yang's heart moved slightly. He had not thought that the Crown Prince would be so clear about his situation. Since it was so, why didn't he think of a way to save himself? In Nie Yang's view, the Crown Prince's recent attitude was somewhat passive. Your Highness's words are incorrect. You are the Crown Prince, the legitimate son of Empress Yuan, the heir to the throne, the rightful successor. Nie Yang said word by word, as long as your Highness is patient and wholeheartedly serves the Emperor, father, the court and the people, how can the 4 princes surpass you? This was not passive resistance, this was called not changing, not fighting was fighting. Nie Qing's heart surged with waves of warmth, his eyes filled with rare sincerity. Grand Tutor, Grandfather and the others also said similar things, but at that time, this solitude felt distraught and did not listen. When Zhou Yi said these words, this solitude had a different experience. When the Crown Prince met his gaze, he felt an indescribable sense of familiarity. He had not been in frequent contact with this Hanlin Academy cultivator, but he unconsciously trusted the other, as if they were old friends from a previous life. If your Highness pays attention to the fight for the throne, you will be at a disadvantage. Nie Yang said, you are the heir to the throne, this is what you were born with, why do you need to fight endlessly with the princes? There is no harm in looking at the world, the people's livelihood, this is the breadth of mind of an emperor. This subject thinks. His Majesty may be using this to train you. The foreign forces are powerful, they can help your Highness now, but in the future they will be a hindrance. The Crown Prince's brows furrowed, showing some anger. Nie Yang, do you know what you are saying? Sowing discord between him and his mother's family? Nie Yang said, I know very well. The Crown Prince said, then you still dare to say it? Nie Yang said, there are some things that I know should not be said, but I still have to say them. This subject serves the Emperor wholeheartedly. You are the legitimate heir, naturally I have to plan for you. The Crown Prince choked, but he could not deny that Nie Yang's words swept away the anxiety of recent years, calming his heart. I don't know why. The Crown Prince looked deeply at Nie Qing. This solitude has a feeling that you seem to be looking at someone. Nie Yang's smile became more difficult and he said awkwardly, this subject will say something offensive. This subject has a cousin, he is also called Qing. Last year at the Jasper Forest banquet, this subject heard your Highness's name and couldn't help it. Thus, this subject feels especially close to your Highness, please forgive me, your Highness. The Crown Prince did not expect this reason and raised a hand to help Nie Yang, who was bowing in apology, up. It's not a big deal, the Crown Prince said. Where is your cousin now? Nie Yang said, this subject made a mistake and my cousin unfortunately died young. Before he died, he said to this subject, our friendship is severed, and we will not meet again on the road to the Yellow Springs. The Crown Prince was not angry at being offended, but rather curious what Nie Yang had done to make his cousin say such harsh words. No, it is not my cousin's fault. Although this subject has a clear conscience to my cousin, this is indeed an unforgivable crime. Zhou Yi is like a woman crying just like that. Probably because the matter had been explained, the Crown Prince's attitude towards Nie Yang became much gentler. Nie Yang was shocked to find that he had unknowingly shed tears, and he immediately felt somewhat embarrassed. Shui. I will not hide it from Zhong Yi. When this solitude first saw Zhong Yi, there was a faint sense of familiarity. When Nie Yang heard this, his eyes widened in shock. Regardless of whether this crown prince was speaking the truth or not, Nie Yang decided to bet all his chips on him. As the emperor grew older, the fight for the throne became more and more serious, and Nie Yang took advantage of this demonic wind to soar. His official career was smooth and the speed of his promotion was as fast as a rocket. At a young age he sat in the position of Yuanfu, the head of the civil officials. Although his relationship with the crown prince was good, it was limited to a personal relationship. When it came to politics, they still fought. The civil and military officials were confused by this. The crown prince's presence was still very low, and his position seemed to be on the verge of collapse, but the old emperor did not show any intention of removing him. He was not anxious, but the four older princes were. Nie Yang smiled coldly as he watched on. He had secretly schemed, causing the first prince, who had military power, to repeatedly make stupid moves, framing, while it could not be said to be framing. The first prince did have the intention of forcing the emperor to abdicate, but Nie Yang had just materialized his thoughts and put them into practice. When the second prince supervised the imperial examinations, Nie Yang had exposed a huge case of cheating in the examination that year, and successfully removed him from the imperial examinations. The third prince was the son of the imperial concubine, so he had some influence in the imperial harem and the court. Nie Yang had started with the imperial concubine's mother's family. In this world, there were only stains that had not been found, and there were no clean and dignified nobles. The fourth prince was even simpler. Nie Yang himself was an Oscar winner, so how could he not see that the fourth prince, who seemed uncompetitive, was actually very scheming? Nie Yang would not be merciful to his own kind. In just a few years he had defeated all the princes. He had eliminated his political enemies at the front, and the crown prince Nie Qing had taken care of things for him from behind, so that the old emperor would not find out. After 2 years the old emperor abdicated as the crown prince. The court was shaken and Nie Yang was stunned. On the eve of his ascension to the throne, the old emperor had looked at him meaningfully, but the crown prince had asked Nie Yang if he had any plans for the future. Nie Yang thought for a long time. First, I will be a powerful official. Second, I will block my cousin on the road to the Yellow Springs. He said that we would not meet again on the road to the Yellow Springs, but I insist on seeing him. Nie Yang looked into the crown prince's eyes and said lightly, whether he admits it or not, I have repaid what I owe him. The crown prince laughed involuntarily. What if he doesn't admit it? Chapter 1660. Lu Jing might have known what Chui was thinking. However, what could he do even if he knew? Lu Jing was a hot-tempered and arrogant man. He would not lower his bottom line just to please Chui, even if Chui was his lord. It wasn't that he didn't know why his relationship with Chui had become so stiff, and it wasn't that he didn't have a way to fix it. The reason why he hadn't taken any action was because he knew very well that the crux of the problem between him and Chui was that they had different ideals. There was no solution to this problem. Unless Chui was fundamentally changed or Lv Jing abandoned himself, he and Chui were destined to walk in opposite directions. For many people, in order to climb up, they could give up anything. Lu Jing also wanted to stand out, but if the price was his bottom line, he would not agree. Thus, the current situation was more or less because Lu Jing had no choice but to go with the flow. No matter how much Lu Jing cursed his lord in his mind, he still had to do what he had to do. Ever since Chui had brought troops to support the front line, the expansion speed of Jiang Pingji's troops had been greatly curbed. After half a month of small-scale confrontations, the troops of both sides were in a stalemate. They were like fire and water, and it looked like an ultimate war was about to break out. Foster father, how could Lord Chui treat you like this? Kang Xintong was like a trapped beast pacing back and forth in the tent. She stomped her feet twice as if she was venting her anger, her eyes wide open. Have you finished reciting today's copy of the Analects of Confucius? What are you angry about? Lu Jing had lost a lot of weight these days. There were piles of bamboo slips and official documents on his desk. He rarely had the time to look up at his indignant adopted daughter. He put down his brush, rubbed his wrist and sighed. Sit down. Don't walk back and forth in the tent. You're making foster father dizzy. Don't be angry, your little mouth is so angry that you can hang a wine cup on it. How could Kang Xintong endure this? She had been staying in Lu Zheng's tent for the past few days. Even if she were to leave, she would bring guards with her to protect herself. Come here and help me tidy up these bamboo slips. Sort them out and tidy them up. Lu Zheng waved at Kang Xintong, trying to persuade his adopted daughter not to get angry so easily. There was really no need to be calculative with Chui. Kang Xintong was about to cry from anger. She hadn't come to the front line, so she didn't know that her foster father was in such a bad situation. Chui, that pig trotter, was a complete scumbag. Did he really think that his godfather was a brick, moving wherever he was needed? The enemy's momentum was fierce, but it was only thanks to Ifu's ingenious plan and the arrangement of the troops that they managed to stabilize the situation, breaking the enemy's momentum and stopping their advance. As soon as the battle formation was stabilized, Chui could not wait to throw Lu Zheng, who was supervising the battle, to the rear to deal with trivial matters. There were so many matters that Lu Zheng had to stay up all night to fight. Kang Xintong could not see anything else. She could only see that Chui had shamelessly taken credit and glory from his subjects. What a shameless pig trotter. Kang Xintong watched as her foster father lost weight. Even if he was busy, he still grabbed hold of her studies and answered her questions. How could she not be touched? His adoptive father was such a good man, so why was Chui so guarded against him? Did Chui really think that his foster father couldn't be anyone else but him? Godfather, your daughter is coming. Kang Xintong was about to say something, but she forcefully held back her words and obediently helped Lu Zheng share his burden. After busying herself for a while and clearing away some of the bamboo slips that had piled up like a mountain on the table, Lu Zheng heaved a sigh of relief. He had the time to discipline his foster daughter. This is a military camp and there are openings in all directions. Remember to be careful with your words and actions, lest the Lord hears what you shouldn't say. Lu Zheng lectured his foster daughter with a stern expression. Kang Xintong hung her head dejectedly and obediently complied. Lu Zheng said, "Actually, it's fine if I'm not at the front of the battle formation. There are many talents in the Lord's camp. Naturally, he can stabilize the situation." Kang Xintong said, "You're kind. You're still covering up for them at this time." She had seen how good Lu Zheng was. In her heart, apart from her idol Jiang Pingji, Lu Zheng was the best. The outcome of the battle isn't something that can be decided by one person. At most, I've prevented them from being schemed against by the enemy, but you can't say that this is all my credit. Speaking up to this point, Lu Zheng paused and added, "Moreover, Lu Xi has yet to appear at the front of the battle formation." Kang Xintong's gaze was filled with doubt. This fellow is... There are few who are better at fighting than him and there are few who are smarter than him. Based on his past experiences, wherever there's a war to fight, he'll be there. Lu Zheng muttered, "Looking at the enemies everywhere, Zhongzhao has basically been defeated. Other than the Lord's Nanxing, he has no other battlefield to join in the fun. The two armies have been at war for more than a month, but there's no trace of him in the various battlefields. It's really strange. In the past, Jiang Pingji was too active. Now that she was suddenly as quiet as a chicken, Lu Zheng felt uneasy." "Foster father, you mean?" Kang Xintong thought that her foster father would say something groundbreaking, but unexpectedly, either he's injured or he's pregnant. However, it's not the first time that Lu Xi has pretended to be sick to deceive people. He's so good at fighting, so it's ridiculous that he's injured or sick. On the contrary, the probability of him being pregnant is higher. Otherwise, I really can't think of why he hasn't appeared at the front of the battle formation. Kang Xintong was speechless. A normal lord wouldn't run to the front to fight with the enemy, right? Besides, why is the probability of him being pregnant higher than being injured? Can't he not appear at the front because he wants to be a good lord? Perhaps there's another plot? For example, to divert attention and sneak attack our army after deceiving everyone? Lu Zheng couldn't help but roll his eyes. The terrain here is open and flat. If there's a sneak attack, his tracks will be exposed before he even gets close. He'll become a hedgehog. No matter what, Lu Zheng was from Langyi Academy. He was one of Master Yuanjing's disciples. His foundation was solid and his knowledge of setting up a camp was perfect. When he chose to set up camp here, he naturally considered the possibility of the enemy launching a sneak attack. Kang Xintong responded with an "oh," and faintly heard Lu Zheng muttering in a low voice. "Something's wrong. How can he be peaceful?" Kang Xintong said, "Foster father, I have something to say, but I don't know if I should say it." "If you don't want to say it, then don't." Lu Jing imitated Jiang Pingji's words. Seeing Kang Xintong's face turn red and her anxious and flustered appearance, he couldn't help but curse Jiang Pingji for leading him astray. He changed his words and said, "I'm just teasing you. Just say what you want to say. Don't hide it." Kang Xintong took a deep breath. "Foster father, since you're close to the Duke of Lanting and Lord Chui treats you so poorly, why do you have to do this? Why don't you make use of our friendship as classmates and make contributions? No matter what, the Duke of Lanting will think highly of you." Lu Zheng's face turned cold, but he didn't get angry and he didn't reprimand her. He just said with a cold face, "Compared to Fang Ji, you seem more like a lobbyist sent by Lu Shi. Whose foster daughter are you?" Chapter 1661. Kang Xintong lowered her head timidly. "There's no room for discussion. You're still young and don't understand. Slate, go and rest." Lu Jing ordered for her to be driven away. Kang Xintong knew she had said something wrong and looked nervous and afraid. She bit her lower lip so hard that a mark appeared. "Here, godfather, sleep early too. Don't tire yourself out." Kang Xintong retreated. Lu Jing stared at the candlelight in a daze. "This child is still too young." Lu Jing sighed softly as if he was lamenting. If Kang Xintong had been calmer, she would have realized that Lu Jing didn't despise her for saying such treacherous words. He didn't even reprimand her. It could be seen that Lu Jing wasn't completely loyal to Chui. He even had many complaints. Just as Lu Jing had said, Kang Xintong was too young. Her thoughts were all natural and didn't know the twists and turns. Lu Zheng's personality determined that he wasn't someone who would surrender without a fight. Flattery was better than death. It was the same even if Chui was a pig. After this conversation, Lu Jing was no different than usual. Kang Xintong, on the other hand, felt guilty and regretful. She had been too impulsive. Even though it was for her godfather's good, he had assisted Chui for so long. He couldn't just give up. Kang Xintong was regretting when a loud horn sounded outside the tent. The drums were beating like thunder, causing the sand on the ground to tremble. Her heart tightened. She secretly opened the tent's curtain and looked outside. Although she couldn't see anything from here, she could feel a murderous aura choking her throat and preventing her from breathing as she looked at the much emptier military camp and the sound of the war drums coming from afar. Kang Xintong looked at the hurried figures and murmured softly. "There's another battle. Is Godfather all right?" The battle had lasted from dawn to dusk. During this time, many wounded soldiers had been carried back from outside. Some of the wounded soldiers were bathed in blood and looked like blood people. Their original appearance could not be seen. Some of them had broken limbs and wreckage, and their human forms could not be seen. All of them were in so much pain that they wanted to die. Moans of pain flowed from the corners of their lips. Almost none of them had their arms or legs intact. Their bodies were covered in wounds. If she wasn't still alive, Kang Xintong would have suspected that she had come to the underworld. Kang Xintong obeyed Lu Zheng's warning and did not dare to run around. Every time the battle started, she would hide in her tent. While his heart was beating like a drum, he listened to the movements outside. Even though Jiang Pingji was her idol, she knew that once Chui was defeated, the military camp would be in danger. Not only would she be in danger, but her godfather would also meet with misfortune. Therefore, every time there was a war, she would worry for a long time from the moment the war drums sounded until the gong sounded to retreat. He was worried that Jiang Pingji would lose and that his foster father would be in danger. She asked someone to leave some food for Zheng. She cooked a small stove to keep him warm so that he could eat hot food as soon as he came back. Perhaps it was because the enemy's offensive had become much fiercer and the war was in a tight situation. Lu Jing did not deal with his chores for the past 2 days. He was summoned by Chui for a meeting before dawn and did not return even when the moon was high in the sky. Not knowing how the battle situation was, Kang Xintong yawned next to the small stove. When she woke up, she did not see Lu Jing return. Could it be that we've lost today? Kang Xintong recalled the number of wounded soldiers she saw during the day. The number was indeed greater than the previous few times, and it looked even more tragic. She hugged her knees and waited for a while. Finally, she heard familiar footsteps coming from outside the tent. Kang Xintong was energized and her sleepiness disappeared completely. "Godfather," she called out. The tent flap was lifted. With the help of a few candles in the tent, she could barely see who it was. Why aren't you sleeping? Lu Xing was slightly stunned. Kong Xintong had already stepped forward to welcome him. He subconsciously took a step back, but it was still too late. Kong Xintong smelled the scent of blood on his body and her expression changed drastically. Kong Xintong asked hurriedly, "Is Godfather injured?" Lu Xing raised his hand to cover his left arm and shook his head. Swords have no eyes in front of a battle. It's inevitable that he will be injured. Kong Xintong said, "Godfather is the military supervisor. He's in the middle of the army. How can he be injured so easily? Unless the formation of the three armies was broken by the enemy and the enemy rushed into their own formation, it was possible that Lu Xing, who was heavily protected, would be accidentally injured." Lu Xing's brows showed some fatigue. He said, "Today's battle situation is not optimistic. The enemy's combat power is extremely strong while our army—" He wanted to say something but stopped. In terms of the number of troops in the three armies, Chui undoubtedly had a great advantage. They were almost twice as many as the enemy. But, in terms of overall combat quality, the elites under Jiang Pingji's command obeyed orders strictly. Their ability to carry out battles was extremely strong, and the combat power they displayed was naturally tyrannical. Even without Jiang Pingji, who was a bug in the game, charging and killing at the front, they gradually suppressed Chui's arrogance. Lu Xing had seen countless storms and waves, but he had never wanted to curse like he did today. Look at the enemy's combat quality, look at his own people's ability to carry out their tasks. The troops under Jiang Pingji's command used their actions to tell Chui that numbers didn't mean everything. Their quality was inferior to the enemy's, and Chui had recruited so many ordinary young men in such a short period of time who were waving flags and shouting battle cries. They had forcefully lowered the overall quality of the troops. Over the past few days, Lu Xing had tasted what it meant to be powerless. He almost couldn't suppress his negative emotions. In his mind, he had several formations to deal with the enemy. He cooperated with the chief commander to issue military orders, but the effect was far from what he had expected. It was as if his brain was active and he tried to control his body to counterattack and defend against the enemy, but his limbs wouldn't listen to him. He was either paralyzed and stiff or he was flailing about. He could only watch helplessly as the enemy's raised blade pierced into his body. Lu Xing had returned so late that day not only because he was injured but more importantly because Chui had made him stay behind and reprimanded him. Everyone knew what the crux of the matter was, but no one stood up for Lu Xing. They didn't dare to say it. What did they say? That the overall combat power of the army wasn't strong because the quality of the troops that Chui had forcibly recruited was too weak. Not only did they not increase their combat power but they were also holding them back. If they said that, it would be tantamount to questioning Chui's decision and ability. No one wanted to commit a crime when Chui was furious. Lu Xing became the scapegoat. Of course, Chui still had a sense of propriety. Although he said it was a reprimand, he actually didn't say anything harsh. After all, his trusted aide and right-hand man Hua Yuan wasn't here. He still needed to rely on Lu Xing now. He couldn't completely offend him and disappoint him. Kong Xintong was silent. She only brought the warm food to Lu Xing, hoping that he would eat a little. "I'm afraid that in this battle, I'll try my best to help you settle down." Jiang Pingji still didn't participate in the battle, but the army led by Fu Wang was assisted by a few famous strategists. Lu Xing was surrounded by useless teammates. He had the heart but not the strength. Before the situation worsened, he planned to first find a way out for Kong Xintong and ensure her safety. "I'm not going anywhere." Kong Xintong refused resolutely. Lu Xing ate in silence, neither agreeing nor disagreeing. Without waiting for Lu Xing to come up with a plan, bad news arrived 2 days later. It shocked the entire army and made them anxious and uneasy. 200,000 dawn of rations had been stolen. Chui was so angry that his entire body trembled. He killed the general who was responsible for escorting the rations. In his heart he even cursed 18 generations of Jiang Pingji's ancestors. Lu Xing frowned slightly. Jiang Pingji, who had been in seclusion for 2 months, had appeared. She seized 200,000 dawn of rations in one move. Lu Xing sighed and said, "It's really her style. It was fine if she didn't move, but once she did she would kill." In response, Jiang Pingji expressed her apology. Me. Chapter 1662. Your Highness, please spare me. I'm really wronged. Lu Zheng had received the news that the rations had been robbed and hurried over, just in time to see two soldiers dragging the tied-up general out to be dealt with according to military law. The general knew he was going to die, but he refused to give up hope of survival. Seeing Lu Zheng's figure from the corner of his eye, he hurriedly straightened his neck and shouted, "Military counselor. Military counselor. I'm wronged. I've been diligent in supervising the rations. I've never betrayed my lord." Hearing him shout, Lu Zheng's feet paused, his wooden clogs making a muffled sound on the gravel. The general struggled and said, "It's not my fault that the rations were leaked. Military counselor, save me. I'm really wronged. The rations were fake. They were switched long ago. I'm wronged. Military counselor, save me." Lu Zheng regained his composure after just one breath. He lifted the curtain of the main tent and bent over to enter. He was late. The tent was already filled with people, but many of them had grave expressions and didn't even notice his arrival. And Cui had just ordered the execution of the general and was still angry. Seeing that Lu Zheng was late, he was even more displeased. He hadn't expected Lu Zheng's tent to be set up so far away from the commander's tent. Even if Lu Zheng had jogged all the way here, he wouldn't have arrived so quickly. Of course, as a qualified scumbag, and Cui wouldn't find fault with himself. Ordering people he didn't like to come and go at his beck and call was the typical behavior of a scumbag. When there was nothing to do, he ignored Lu Zheng. When there was something to do, he spoke intimately. He suppressed his displeasure and asked for a solution in a low voice. His eyes seemed to flow with pure trust. Lu Zheng had long been used to Cui's behavior. While sighing that his lord was a drama queen and every inch of her was an actor, he bowed in shame and said, "I heard about the rations being robbed and rushed here. I didn't have time to understand the details." And Cui choked, feeling even more suffocated. Seeing that Cui had nothing to say, Lu Zheng turned his head to ask the others what had happened. And Cui silently swallowed the roiling scolding in his throat. He suppressed his irritation and waited for Lu Zheng to understand what had happened. 200,000 dawn of rations was not a small number, and it was also related to the army's consumption for a while, so the troops guarding the rations naturally did not dare to slack off. Unfortunately, no matter how hard they tried, they still failed to defend against the enemy. When the grain transport army was about to arrive, they were robbed by the enemy. Everyone thought that it was Jiang Pingji's masterpiece with her execution ability. Jiang Pingji's status rose along with the tide. The things she had done were studied under a magnifying glass and analyzed over and over again. As her enemies, and Cui and the others naturally knew how many things this fiend had done that made people tremble in fear just by hearing her name. After the analysis, they unanimously threw the blame to her. Little did they know that after Jiang Pingji turned over a new leaf, she did not roam the front lines anymore, let alone bring people to rob rations. It was true that the people under her command had robbed the rations, but she was not the one who had benefited from the rations. Lu Zheng was keenly aware that something was wrong. He furrowed his brows and asked the people around him. After a while he said to Cui, "My lord, there are still doubtful points in this matter. I sincerely ask my lord to retract your order and spare General Chai's life for now." Cui almost fainted from anger. He could not suppress his temper and reprimanded Lu Zheng for having ulterior motives in front of everyone. General Chai, whom Lu Zheng had accused of collaborating with the enemy and betraying his lord, should be killed if not this kind of person? Kill Lu Zheng. Cui did not expect Lu Zheng to plead for mercy on General Chai's behalf. He was even more furious. "I sincerely ask my lord to listen to me. There are many doubtful points in this matter. My lord should treat it with caution." Lu Zheng looked like he was going by the book. His tone was indifferent. "The matter of the rations is a secret of our army. How did the enemy know so much about it and catch General Chai off guard?" Cui laughed coldly and asked in return, "This person even has a letter of collaboration with the enemy and betrayal of his lord. How do you think Lu Xi knows so much about it?" The enemy could tell at a glance that this had been planned for a long time. There must have been an insider who leaked information to them. Who else could it be other than General Chai, who had irrefutable evidence? He really did not know what was wrong with such a stupid question. Lu Zheng said, "In that case, after the rations were stolen, why didn't he take the opportunity to be captured by Lu Xi and escape from his predicament? Instead, he led an army to break out of the encirclement and pass the news to my lord, causing him to be killed in the end. Also, General Chai said that the rations were fake. What's going on? And Cui said angrily, it's just a trader's way of survival and framing others. Lu Xing did not think so. When the enemy had launched a sneak attack, General Chai had tried his best to protect the rations. However, the enemy had the advantage of time, place and people. They had suddenly attacked and caught everyone off guard. With a ferocious move, the soldiers guarding the rations had been beaten senseless. General Chai had tried his best to delay the enemy but to no avail. In the end he had no choice but to burn all the rations. They could not use them and the rations could not fall into the enemy's hands. In the end, the rations on the top were normal but the rations on the bottom were disguised. They did not contain rations at all. When General Chai discovered this, he was completely stunned. This was far more terrifying than an enemy's sneak attack. And Cui wanted to kill him, so he revealed this matter. In the end no one believed him. Framing others? Framing who? Lu Xing said in a low voice. No matter how protective the Lord is, he should not be biased at a time like this. The person in charge of the rations was Hua Yuan. If the rations Hua Yuan had prepared were real, then General Chai was the liar. On the other hand, this problematic batch of rations had been prepared by Hua Yuan. Perhaps the one who leaked the details of the rations and attracted the enemy's precise attack was Hua Yuan. After some maneuvering, this batch of 200,000 dawn of rations was rightfully taken by Hua Yuan. Of course, and Cui was not the only one who did not believe this. The others did not believe it either. What would Hua Yuan gain by doing this? They did not know, but Lu Xing did. That madman's inner core was Lu Xi. What did he gain by seizing the rations and heartlessly betraying his teammates? This monster was preparing to ascend to the heavens. Of course, even if Lu Xing told the others that Hua Yuan's essence had been divided into Lu Xi, no one would believe him. Instead they would think that he was using clumsy and underhanded methods to suppress Hua Yuan. Lu Xing could not be bothered with this thankless task. Do whatever you want. He had lost all hope in his teammates. And Cui was so angry that he was about to ascend to the heavens. What did Lu Xing mean by this? Was he reprimanding him for being biased in front of everyone? They did not know that Jiang Pingji was also very angry. The anger levels of the two feudal lords had reached a delicate balance. Jiang Pingji looked at the rations that Li Yun had snatched back and her face darkened. Humph, Lu Xiaoyin has eaten a lot of pig's brains over the years. His brain is quite nourished. He even schemed against me. She gritted her teeth so hard that they made a ringing sound. The rations that she had spent so much effort to steal were actually fake. Her efforts had become a joke. After thinking about it, she locked her target on Lu Xing. After all, this kind of underhanded plotting was indeed like him. No matter how big her brain was, she could not have guessed that in Cui's official Hua Yuan's essence had created a Lu Xi and was secretly preparing to cause trouble. The real mastermind, Hua Yuan, stared coldly at the small porcelain bottle in his hand and smiled. What is this? The Xicheng Emperor's concubine asked anxiously. Hua Yuan said, poison. The Xicheng Emperor's concubine stuck out her belly and trembled. She asked fearfully, to whom? Hua Yuan laughed. Guess. The Emperor's concubine was speechless. Chapter 1663. This poison is for Cui? The Xicheng Emperor's concubine knew that Hua Yuan was ambitious, but she didn't expect him to be so decisive. He actually wanted to poison Cui. No matter how bad Cui was, his trust in Hua Yuan and importance to him was unquestionable. He even valued Hua Yuan and neglected Lu Xing. Now Hua Yuan wanted Hua Yuan dead for some unknown reason. The Xicheng Emperor's concubine shuddered at the thought of it. On second thought, Hua Yuan had forced her to do something even more disgusting. It didn't seem out of line for this person to have the ambition to kill her lord. Hua Yuan glanced at the Xicheng Emperor's concubine, his thin lips curving into a smile. The golden light shone on his face, forming a faint halo. He looked like a god. Xicheng's emperor concubine felt even more complicated when she saw this. Heaven had given Hua Yuan an outstanding appearance, an elegant demeanor, and even extraordinary intelligence. Yet such a beautiful appearance hid such filth and filth. One could not help but sigh. As the Xicheng Emperor's concubine's thoughts ran wild, she heard Hua Yuan's calm reply. Why would the side lady think that I want to poison my lord to death? My lord has treated me well. A drop of water should be repaid with a spring. The Xicheng Emperor's concubine choked. Her face contorted. A drop of water should be repaid with a spring? The spring, he mentioned was secretly transplanting a large patch of green grassland on his lord's head? Not only did he transplant the grassland but he also manipulated it in secret. He relied on Enchui's trust to tamper with the rations. She wasn't wrong. The rations that Li Yun had gone through so much trouble to rob had been intentionally given away by Hua Yuan. Only 10% of the rations were real. The other 90% were fake. Hua Yuan had secretly leaked information to lure the enemy over to rob the rations. Jiang Pingji had taken the bait and sent people to rob the rations. The 200,000 dawn of provisions were easily taken away by the enemy. Through this method, Hua Yuan managed to keep this batch of rations for himself in a justifiable manner. The Xichang Emperor's concubine and the prince felt uneasy. Hua Yuan's methods were so vicious and swift. Could they really gain even the slightest bit of advantage from him? The Empress concubine did her best to suppress the fear, worry and fear in her heart, and forced out an extremely stiff smile. Hua Yuan had secretly embezzled a huge amount of rations and didn't even care about the lives and deaths of the frontline soldiers. Even a 3-year-old child wouldn't believe that he didn't have the intention to rebel. How could I not believe Sir's words? I misunderstood you just now. Although Emperor concubine Xichang said that, no one knew what she was thinking. I'm stupid. I hope you can give me some pointers so that I can understand. You don't know, but the Lord has been looking forward to the child in your womb for a long time. Hua Yuan stretched out his hand and used the back of his finger to caress Xichang's imperial concubine's protruding belly. The imperial concubine was so frightened by his actions that her entire body stiffened. She did not dare to move. Cold sweat broke out on her forehead and her slender body trembled slightly. It was as if Hua Yuan was not using his finger but a sword to threaten her. Finally, when she realized that Hua Yuan hadn't harmed her, she heaved a long sigh of relief. She faintly felt as if she had escaped from death. Sir knows this child isn't. Hua Yuan retracted his hand and took out a handkerchief from his sleeve to wipe his fingers. His movements were reserved and elegant, as if there was really something dirty on it. The Lord doesn't know, does he? He said indifferently. He doesn't know. The child you bear is his flesh and blood. Emperor concubine shut her mouth because she realized that Hua Yuan's eyes were flashing with murderous intent. If she said one more thing that she didn't dare to say, she didn't doubt that the poison in Hua Yuan's hands would enter her mouth. As if he was murmuring carelessly, Hua Yuan said, if only this child was a son. The Lord would have a successor. Emperor concubine forced a smile. Even if it's a son, he's just a bastard son. Lang Jun still has a legitimate young master. Because Enchui's body was damaged, he could no longer impregnate women. In order to appease the officials who followed him, he adopted a son from a branch family. After many years, this young master had long been recognized by the officials. Everyone treated him as Enchui's successor. Even if Emperor concubine Xichang gave birth to Enchui's biological son, he would only be a bastard son. He wouldn't be able to compete with the adopted son and nominal son of the legitimate wife. When her child grew up, who knew if Enchui would still be alive? After all, there was a lunatic like Hua Yuan on the inside and Jiang Pingji on the outside. Enchui was sandwiched between them. No matter how you looked at it, he seemed like a short-lived creature. Even if Jiang Pingji didn't kill Enchui, the young master would have grown up after many years. How could a young child be able to compete with him? Plus, Emperor concubine Xichang's mind spun. An extremely daring idea suddenly popped into her mind. Could it be? Her eyes widened and she took half a step back in fright. If the poison in Hua Yuan's hands wasn't prepared for Enchui, then it was prepared for the young master. If the young master died, Enchui would stay at the front lines and be controlled by Hua Yuan. Wouldn't his life and death be at Hua Yuan's disposal? As long as the two of them died, the child in her womb could only be used as a bargaining chip for Hua Yuan to seize power. As expected, Hua Yuan said, "Young master?" Sighed Madam, the Lord values the child in your womb more. He has long had the intention to abolish Li. Abolish Li? Yes, this is indeed the Lord's intention. The young master is a stumbling block for the child in the side Madam's womb. A stumbling block naturally had to be kicked out. Emperor concubine Xichang felt a chill in her heart. She didn't doubt Enchui's ruthlessness. His intention to abolish Li was probably true, but whether it was Enchui's idea or Hua Yuan's own decision to poison the young master was debatable. Enchui was shameless, but he wasn't brainless. He favored his biological son, but before his biological son grew up he wouldn't kick out his backup stepson early. An unborn child, no one knew how talented he was and whether he could grow up safely. In summary, this was most likely Hua Yuan's own intention. How can a woman like me understand these things? Everything will be decided by the master. Hua Yuan laughed. That won't do. I'll need a little help from the side, madam. Emperor concubine Xichang's eyelids twitched violently. What kind of help? Hua Yuan leaned forward and whispered a few words into her ear. Emperor concubine's body trembled slightly. Her eyes were filled with shock and fear. As if this matter, her lips trembled and she wanted to refuse, but when she saw Hua Yuan's half-smiling eyes and the murderous intent deep in them, she had no choice but to give in. Everything will be arranged by the master. Emperor concubine held her stomach with one hand and lowered her head. Hatred and indignation that could topple mountains and overturn seas rose in her heart. It was too unbearable and humiliating to be at someone's mercy. A conspiracy quietly took shape. 2 days later a spring rain came. The mountain mist was thick and light, and the air was filled with the fragrance of soil and spring rain. The faint sound of horse hooves approached from afar. Chapter 1664. It's a pity that you didn't come hunting today. The weather had been good these days, so the youth had asked Hua Yuan out to hunt with him. However, Hua Yuan had been troubled by the looting of rations and could only decline the youth's invitation. The youth was disappointed, but he also understood that business was more important. He didn't dare to act recklessly. Ever since Enchui's side wife had gotten pregnant, the youth could clearly feel that his father treated him differently. For example, during this war, as the heir who was about to reach adulthood, he had been left behind. It was said to be for protection, but honestly, did he need such protection in troubled times? A few years ago the youth had gone to Dongqing with his master Hua Yuan, to seek an alliance. At that time there was no mention of protection. Why did Enchui suddenly say protection, when he was about to reach adulthood? On the surface it was protection, but in reality, it was weakening the relationship between the youth and Enchui's subjects. The youth wasn't stupid. He naturally realized it. However, he couldn't tell anyone about it. He could only suppress it in his heart. As an idler and also to show his father how harmless he was, he had been addicted to hunting and pleasure. His master Hua Yuan had even lectured him seriously. Don't be addicted to pleasure and neglect your studies and government affairs. The youth could only smile bitterly. He didn't dare look up at Hua Yuan's disappointed eyes. He hadn't grown his wings yet and could only rely on Enchui. Even a sneeze from Enchui made his heart jump and his thoughts run wild. The only fortunate thing was that his master Hua Yuan was the only person who had maintained a normal attitude toward him after the incident. Because they were rare, they were precious. The youth saw how Hua Yuan treated him, so he naturally trusted and respected him even more. He looked at the prey hanging from the horse's back and seemed to think of something. The corners of his lips curled involuntarily, and his eyes curved into 2 crescent moons. His clear eyes were filled with a smile. He was very good-looking. Even though he still looked a little young, his bearing had already been developed. Anyone who saw such an outstanding youth in the wilderness would probably think that they had seen a beautiful spirit. I'm lucky today. This wasn't a good season for hunting. The prey had just survived winter and were skinny, not as plump as they were in autumn. However, the prey today were all good. Their fur was smooth and beautiful. The youth planned to pick the best and give it to Hua Yuan. The servant who served the youth cursed his bad luck. He mumbled, "How is it good luck? We've been completely drenched." The youth looked up at the rainwater dripping down from the eaves, brushing the moss green. Although the weather was not beautiful at this time, it did not affect the youth's bright mood. He said with a smile, "It's raining and we've already come across a wooden hut. Isn't that good?" When hunters went hunting in the mountains, those who were lucky could go and return on the same day. Those who were unlucky had to wait patiently in the mountains for a few days. For the sake of convenience, they would build this kind of temporary shelter and passers-by could also rest here. The young man was in a good mood and did not feel that the rain was inappropriate. The attendant untied the wineskin from the back of the horse and handed it to the youth with both hands. "Young master, drink some wine to warm up your body lest you catch a cold." The rain came suddenly. Even though everyone found shelter as fast as they were still wet. Their clothes and hair were wet. The young man was of high status. If he fell sick because his attendants did not take good care of him, the attendants accompanying him would be in trouble. The attendant saw the young man take the wineskin and gulp it down. Only then did he feel relieved and turn around to fetch a clean set of clothes. Although the wooden hut was small, it had all the essentials. There was also a lot of dry firewood in the house, just enough to make a fire and boil water for the young man to bathe. The young man waved his hand and said, "Put the clothes aside. I'll change later. I don't want to move now." "Yes." The attendant put the clothes where the young man could reach out his hand and respectfully stepped back to guard nearby. He did not know whether it was because his alcohol tolerance was too poor, or because the wine today was especially fragrant, but the young man finished the wineskin in a few mouthfuls. His white jade-like cheeks were slightly tipsy and the drunkenness rushed to his head. Not long after, his white jade-like cheeks were covered with a thin layer of red, and his whole body exuded the unique youthful spirit of a young man. He did not care at first but soon noticed something strange. A familiar yet strange hot wave spread from inside to outside, making his skin hot and red. He could not help but raise his hand to loosen his clothes to cool down. This feeling, the young man was a little angry. "What's with this wine?" The attendant heard the commotion and rushed over. Hearing the young man's question, he was shocked. "Young master, wasn't this wine given by Master Hua Yuan?" The young man suddenly remembered something, and his expression became slightly unnatural. It turned out that this wine was found by the young man's concubine from somewhere and given to the young man. The young man knew that it was rare wine, so he gave it to Hua Yuan. Hua Yuan had been busy with the military rations recently and had not rested for several days. He was not in the mood to taste the wine, so he asked the young man to pack most of the wine back. In other words, this problematic wine should have been done by the young man's concubine. Thinking of this, the young man's cheeks burned like a burning cloud. He was ashamed, angry, and hateful. The women in the inner residence would really do anything to be favored. Fortunately, the teacher did not drink it. If he did, he might make a fool of himself. The young man's face turned pale, then green, then purple, and finally black. The attendant was a very discerning person. He did not know what had happened, but it did not prevent him from taking the opportunity to flatter the young man. He said flatteringly, "I see that the young master looks tired. Why don't you go in and rest?" The young man felt uncomfortable, but he nodded in agreement. Just as he was about to get up, his body suddenly froze on the spot. He did not know whether he should get up or not. It was very awkward. He had been dreaming since he was 13. 2 years ago, his father and Cui had prepared 2 intelligent and beautiful concubines for him to learn about human relationships. With these experiences, he naturally knew what the changes in his body meant. He immediately became even more embarrassed. He unnaturally tightened his legs. However, he was dressed more professionally today, so the reaction under his abdomen was slightly more obvious. The attendant's sharp eyes saw the small tent under his abdomen and understood. The young man was extremely embarrassed. He ran into the farmhouse as if he was escaping and slammed the door shut. This kind of farmhouse was a place for hunters to rest. The environment was simple, but it could shelter them from the wind and rain. There were guards outside, so ordinary hunters could not enter. The young man glanced at his abdomen and his face became even more ashen. The attendant was a clever person. He asked in a low voice, "Young master, do you want to call for someone?" "There's no need for now." The young man replied in a hoarse voice. Even his breath was hot. The accompanying attendants were all men in their teens or 20s. There were no women. Chapter 1665. Of course, this was not an absolute rule. It was just an unspoken rule. The young man had lived in such an environment since he was a child, so he naturally understood the hints of the servants. He asked someone to prepare cold water for him, intending to soak in it to suppress the rising desire in his body. However, a basin of cold water was not enough. He could not calm down no matter how he tossed and turned. Instead, he was so hot that his whole body was restless. The young man's body was the most sensitive. The tide of passion came violently and violently. The more he endured, the more pain he felt. This was not the way to go on. The young man's whole body was hot and his consciousness was a little blurred. He seemed to vaguely hear the creaking sound of the wooden door being opened. "Who is it?" the young man shouted in a daze. The person's footsteps were light. As the person approached, A delicate fragrance that almost made him lose his mind surrounded him. The young man opened his eyes to look, but a soft and fragrant hand covered his eyes, making him see darkness. Langnun. Faintly, the person's sweet voice sounded in his ears. His sensitive earlobe was sucked by the other person's hot and wet mouth. The young man could not bear it. He raised his hand and pushed the person away, pressing her to the ground. He looked closer and saw that the other person was wearing a thin veil. Her delicate outline was hidden behind the veil, faintly discernible. Only her eyes were clear and moving. The other person seemed to be frightened by his actions. She opened her mouth slightly and let out a short scream. It was as if someone was using a soft feather to tickle the young man's heart, making him lose his mind. It was drizzling outside, but the passion in the room was intense. Not long after, there was a movement that made people blush. The young man, who was occupied by his instincts, did not notice that the person's lower abdomen was protruding, and she began to struggle and call for help. When the drizzle outside stopped, the passion in the room also came to an end. The sunset outside added a bit of a ghost. The young man woke up from his sleep and got up in a daze. He keenly noticed that something was wrong. There was another person's breathing next to him. He turned his head and saw a woman with a protruding lower abdomen and tearful cheeks lying next to him. At first glance, this person's profile was slightly familiar. The young man's memories before he fell asleep quickly came back, and the memory of the passion also flashed in front of his eyes. The young man was shocked and shivered. He recalled the appearance of the woman before her hair was scattered. It was clearly a married woman. Then he looked at her lower abdomen. The youth's face was like an overturned palette with all kinds of colors. At this time, the woman moaned and opened her eyes. When she saw the youth's appearance, she screamed and sat up. She covered her stomach with one hand and grabbed the scattered clothes to cover her body with the other. Because of this, the young man also saw the woman's appearance clearly, and it was as if he had been struck by lightning. Wasn't this person his adoptive father and Chui's side wife, the Empress concubine from Xichang, his adoptive mother? Unfilial son. How could you do such a despicable thing? Are you worthy of your father? Without waiting for the youth to come back to his senses, Princess Concubine of Xichang cried and slapped him. At that moment, Princess Concubine Xichang's maidservant barged in. She was scared out of her wits by the situation. Anyone with a discerning eye would know what had happened to the two people in the room. One was Chui's concubine and she was pregnant. The other was Chui's adopted son, currently the rightful heir. These two were mother and son in name, but now they were actually together. Princess Concubine Xichang was in so much pain that she wanted to die. Her hair was messy and her exposed skin was bruised. It was obvious that she had been forced by her stepson. Because of the maidservant, the youth did not even have the chance to make up for it. There was only one thought in his mind: it's over. My stomach. Princess Concubine clutched her stomach, her face pale. Both the maidservant and the youth were scared out of their wits. The maidservant hurriedly wanted to find someone to take a look at Princess Concubine and protect the child in her womb. Nothing could happen to her. The scene was in chaos. The youth's servants had also been attracted by the maidservant's movements. Looking at the chaotic scene, the youth realized that he had missed a great opportunity to salvage the situation. If people knew that he had sex with his father's concubine, and that he had clearly forced himself on her while drunk, he would definitely be finished. Even if he was innocent. At that moment, the youth had already realized that this was a plot against him. He had fallen into someone's trap. Unfortunately, there were witnesses and material evidence. Even if he had mouths all over his body, he could not clear his name. At that moment, if the youth had half the decisiveness and viciousness of the mentally ill Hua Yuan, he could have killed Princess Concubine Xichang and her maidservants. Then he could come up with an excuse. As long as there was no evidence, no one would know what he had done to Princess Concubine Xichang. Although the servants knew, they were all the youth's people, so it was easy to clean them up. However, the youth was not Hua Yuan. He did not have the decisiveness to grasp this last opportunity. The price was that this matter would reach his master Hua Yuan. If Hua Yuan knew, that meant that his adoptive father and Chui would know sooner or later. Sir, this student is really innocent. The youth could not defend himself. He could only hope that Hua Yuan would believe him. Hua Yuan said angrily, "Innocent? Bullying a concubine's mother is innocent? How many people saw what you did? The youth's face was pale. Hua Yuan said, I've already dealt with most of the blabbermouths who knew. This matter should be handled by the Lord herself. The youth panicked when he heard this. If Chui knew he would definitely die. Sir, why won't you listen to me? You raised me personally. How can you not know what kind of person I am? How can your student be worse than a beast? The youth knelt on the ground and cried. This student was really set up. That pot of wine was drugged by the lowly servant in the backyard. Also, the concubine mother appeared at a very suspicious time. Must have been her. You're so stupid. Hua Yuan rebuked him angrily. She is pregnant with the Lord's son. Even if she sees you as a thorn in her side, she has to wait until after the baby is born. What benefit does she get from setting you up now? But because of you, the fetus in her womb is showing signs of instability. If it weren't for the doctor's superb medical skills and her good foundation, this fetus would definitely not be able to survive. Anyone with a discerning eye can see that no matter who schemes against you, she would never scheme against you. Not only can you not get away with this excuse, you even have a guilty conscience. The youth had already lost his mind. His mind was a mess and he trembled all over. Hua Yuan said, Your attendants said that they heard a woman crying for help in the room. They went up to investigate but were scolded by you. There are witnesses and material evidence. How do you expect me to believe your words? Did you bully your concubine mother after drinking, or were you set up? What I think is not important. What's important is what outsiders think and what the Lord thinks. I will tell the Lord the truth and see what the Lord decides. The youth's lips turned pale. Sir, Father, will never forgive this student. I don't want to die yet. Chapter 1666. Because of Hua Yuan's refusal, the youth could only leave anxiously. Before he left, he even looked back 3 times. Hua Yuan watched him leave but said nothing. His expression was solemn. The youth could only give up for now. Sir, what should we do now? Xianxia's Empress concubine thought that Hua Yuan would poison the youth to death quickly. She had never expected that he would do nothing even after several days. As long as the youth did not die, Xianxia's Empress concubine would live in fear. She was afraid that Hua Yuan would abandon her and become a useless pawn. She had followed Hua Yuan's instructions and walked down a path of no return. She schemed that the youth had an affair with her. If the youth and Chui did not die, she would be the one to die when the child in her womb was born. With Chui's temperament, how could he tolerate his concubine being tainted by an adopted son? If Chui found out that the child in her womb was not his, Xianxia's Empress concubine would probably wish for death. She was like a drowning person, clutching tightly to the straw in her hands before she died. Xianxia's Empress concubine held her obvious belly with one hand and carefully leaned against the table, afraid that something would happen to the child. I have done everything according to Sir's instructions. There is no turning back. If Sir abandons me now, I really do not know what to do. Her face was filled with tenderness. One could not help but reach out to smooth her frowning brows. Of course, this person did not include Hua Yuan. This lunatic had a heart of stone. I know. Hua Yuan said coldly. He had no intention of giving a precise reply. Sir, I am worried that a long delay will bring trouble. Although the young master is young, he is still a child personally raised by Sir and Chui. If he is not eliminated quickly, he will be a disaster. Xianxia's Empress concubine did not forget to flatter Hua Yuan. Also, my pregnancy has been affected because of that matter. If he takes this opportunity to harm me, I will be so worried that I will not be able to sleep at night. She had only dared to plot against the youth according to Hua Yuan's instructions because the appearance of the fetus was already stable. In order to pretend to be more realistic, some of the struggling movements were inevitably more violent. The youth had also lost his rationality under the influence of the drug and his movements were rough. That young and strong body made her suffer greatly, and even her stomach began to feel uncomfortable. Only then did she panic. Under Hua Yuan's threat, she had already thrown caution to the wind. However, if the youth didn't die, she would never be at ease. She could only urge Hua Yuan to take action again and again. How could Hua Yuan not know what she was thinking? Hua Yuan's lips curled into a cold smile. There's no rush. It's almost there. Emperor concubine Xianxia pressed. What do you mean by not in a hurry? How soon is it? As long as he lives, I will live in fear. If she could, she would love nothing more than for Hua Yuan to pinch the young man's chin and pour poison into him. That way all troubles would end once and for all and there would be no future troubles. Hua Yuan snorted and did not answer. Xichang's princess concubine saw his unhappy expression and immediately came to her senses. She regretted being too impulsive. "I'm just worried." "I'm not doubting you," she explained dryly, trying to salvage some of the situation so that Hua Yuan wouldn't be in a bad mood and pour all his dirty tricks on her. "There's no need to worry." Hua Yuan's expression softened slightly as he said, "The time is ripe." This answer put Xichang's princess concubine's worried heart back to its original place. She and Hua Yuan had the same interests. At present they were two grasshoppers tied to the same rope. If anything happened to her, Hua Yuan would not be able to escape. Reality proved that her worries were unfounded. Hua Yuan, that maniac, would definitely be able to scheme against anyone. The young man was still too young. In terms of skill and scheming, how could he compare to the scheming and maniac Hua Yuan? Xichang's princess concubine thought that Hua Yuan had not taken action, but that was not the case. Hua Yuan had taken action. However, he did not harm the young man's body but his mind. He suppressed his will and destroyed his psychological defenses, forcing the young man to lose all will to live in his panic. Finally, he consumed the poison that Hua Yuan had gotten someone to deliver to the young man. On this day the night was dark. The moon was hidden behind the dark clouds and the stars were dim. Hua Yuan stood under the window in a daze with his clothes draped over his shoulders. He was not in the mood to sleep. There was a letter on the table beside him. This letter had been delivered by the young man's attendant several hours ago. Because it was not personally delivered to Hua Yuan only saw it after he was done with all his work. The contents of the letter were not very useful. It was just the last cry of a desperate and dying young beast. When all was silent, a flurry of hurried footsteps could be heard from afar. When the other person ran closer, Hua Yuan could still hear the other person's heavy breathing. He looked at the approaching person with an indifferent expression, his brows slightly furrowed. Hua Yuan asked unhappily, "What's the matter?" The servants in the residence were all well-mannered. They served Hua Yuan carefully and would not run loudly under normal circumstances. However, at this moment they did not care about the rules. One could imagine how sensational the news brought by the servant was. Master, something bad has happened." The servant caught his breath and said breathlessly, "The young master is dead." "Dead?" "Yes, the news just came. The young master committed suicide by ingesting poison. He's already gone." The servant trembled as he finished speaking. His eyes stared unblinkingly at Hua Yuan. His muscles tensed as he moved forward to catch the grieving Hua Yuan. Unexpectedly, Hua Yuan's reaction was beyond the servant's expectations. He thought that based on the deep relationship between Hua Yuan and the young master, even if he did not faint from grief, he would be horrified upon hearing this. However, Hua Yuan's expression did not change at all. It was as if the one who died was not his student, but an insignificant child beggar. He did not even ask how he died. It was as if Hua Yuan had already expected this and had been waiting for this news to come. The servant was frightened by his own guess. He hurriedly lowered his head, afraid that Hua Yuan would see an expression that he should not have. "Already know. You may leave and prepare the clothes." The young man's death was no different from an earthquake to others, but it was within Hua Yuan's expectations. His indifferent gaze turned to the letter on the table, and the corners of his lips curled up in silent mockery. Stupid. This was Hua Yuan's evaluation of the young man's death. If he was not stupid and weak, how could the young man not know who the real person was? Before he died, he even wrote to him. His words were sincere and every sentence was filled with remorse. He said that he had let down Hua Yuan's many years of teaching. Now that he was gone, he asked him not to grieve for an incompetent and unfilial student. The victim's suicide note to the murderer was so sincere. It was really ridiculous. He's destined not to live. It's clean now that he's gone. Hua Yuan felt a little regretful. The young man was taught by Hua Yuan, but his ambition was not big enough. Chapter 1667. Without Princess Xichang, Chui would not kill the youth immediately out of consideration for the greater good. Because Chui needed a stable heir. If the youth lay low, he might have a chance to make a comeback in the future. Unfortunately, he was still too young. Faced with such mental pressure, the only way he could think of was to commit suicide. When Hua Yuan arrived, the youth's corpse had already been put away. He had changed into clean clothes and had light makeup on his face. Now that his eyes were closed, he did not look like he was dead, but more like he had fallen asleep. When the sun rose, he would open his pure and lively eyes, and Chui's officials who were guarding the rear crawled out of bed when they heard the news. Who killed young master? A hot-tempered old official dressed in plain clothes with a white belt around his waist rushed over with a murderous aura. The moment he arrived, he stared fiercely at Princess Xichang. Could it be you, vixen? The old official had heard of the scandal a while ago, but he would not abandon the young master he had watched grow up for a fallen country's concubine. Even if it was a scandal, it was the woman's fault. Abandoning Princess Xichang to protect the young master was a matter of course in his eyes. These days he had been thinking about how to save the youth's life, trying to find fault with Princess Xichang and push all the blame onto her. If that did not work, he could only take the risk and send a suicide squad to kill Princess Xichang. Unexpectedly, before he could do anything, the young master had already committed suicide by poisoning himself. Looking at the youth lying on the bed and seeing that his chest was no longer heaving, he immediately felt sorrow. Princess Xichang saw the old official draw his sword and was about to kill her. She was so frightened that her face paled and she screamed. Hua Yuan grabbed the old official's wrist and used a little force to make him release the sword hilt in pain. He said angrily, "Have you had enough?" The old official said relentlessly, "This vixen must die today." For some reason, ever since he had stepped into the house where the youth had committed suicide, Hua Yuan had felt a tightness in his chest. He did not know where this feeling came from, but it had pushed his rationality to the brink of collapse. He was easily angered and irritable. The old official had drawn his sword and caused trouble at this time, directly infuriating Hua Yuan. He pushed the old official away and almost lost his footing. It was as if his brain had lost blood, causing his vision to flicker. Hua Yuan angrily rebuked the old official. The old official said, "Young master was plotted against by that B*Tsh and forced to his death. Even if I have to risk my life, I will eliminate her." Xichang's Empress concubine screamed as she hid behind her maidservant. When she heard the old official's scolding, she could not help but agree. The old man's words were absolutely right. Wasn't Hua Yuan the B*T she was referring to? The room was in chaos and people rushed over to stop the two of them. Some stopped the old official and some stopped Hua Yuan. Regardless of whether the young man's death was honorable or not, the deceased was more important. His body had just cooled down, so they could not make a ruckus here and disturb the deceased. Moreover, it was really inappropriate for the two of them to fight in front of the corpse. "I told you to scram." Hua Yuan raised his hand and waved his sleeve, brushing away the people who tried to stop him. Before he could take half a step forward, he felt a sharp pain in the depths of his mind. The scenery in front of him blurred and turned scarlet. In Hua Yuan's eyes, the figures around him were all people made of blood without facial features. Their mouths opened and closed as they said something. One voice became two, two became four, four became eight. Gradually, the voices from all directions became thousands, interfering with his hearing. Hua Yuan's feet felt weak as he stumbled and fell forward. Fortunately, someone was quick enough to pull him up or he would have crashed to the ground. Everyone was shocked by this turn of events. Even the old official who wanted to take Xichang's Empress concubine's life was distracted. When they came over, they saw that Hua Yuan's face was abnormally pale. They thought that he was suppressing his grief, but they did not expect him to release his emotions. Everyone thought of the teacher-student relationship between Hua Yuan and the young man and felt very sad. They did not expect Hua Yuan to have such crazy looks. "Stop arguing. All of you stop arguing. All of you scram. Scram." Hua Yuan pushed away the people who approached him and shouted at the top of his lungs. His eyes were bloodshot and he looked deranged. "Young master has passed away. My condolences, military advisor. The dead cannot be remembered. Scram. All of you scram." Hua Yuan held his head in pain with one hand and pointed at the crowd with the other, telling them to stop talking. His head was really about to explode. His head hurt like there was a hand stirring his brain and crushing his skull. He was in so much pain that he was on the verge of death. After an unknown amount of time, Hua Yuan finally regained some of his senses. He knelt on the ground. His usual elegant demeanor was completely gone. All that was left was a strange madness and a dejection that came from his soul. Everyone thought that he had lost his composure because he could not take the blow. They did not expect Hua Yuan's next move to almost make their eyes pop out of their sockets. With a swoosh, he unsheathed his sword. Someone was so frightened that he shouted, "Military advisor, you mustn't." It turned out that Hua Yuan had taken advantage of the fact that no one was paying attention to pull out the sword from his opponent's waist and pretended to commit suicide. Judging from his expression and posture, he was clearly ready to die. In the nick of time, someone stepped forward to snatch his sword, but he was still a step too late. A long but not deep wound appeared on his neck. Seeing this, the others took the opportunity to rush forward and stop Hua Yuan, afraid that he would continue to seek death when he recovered. If Hua Yuan died, and Cui at the front lines would explode on the spot. Why are you stopping me?" Hua Yuan roared these words. His cheeks were covered in tears. Someone said, "The young master has passed away. My condolences, military advisor." How could the Lord's trusted aide commit suicide to follow the young master after he passed away? Not to mention that the young master had not died honorably. He had committed suicide to escape punishment after defiling his stepmother. "I am responsible for the young master's death. I deserve to die. Don't stop me." How could anyone take his words seriously? Instead, they thought that Hua Yuan was a loyal person. They did not dare to let go and let him seek death. Hua Yuan wanted to break down even more now. He was the one who had caused the death of his student. No, to be more precise, he had personally destroyed his student after he had lost his mind. He was the one who deserved to die. Hua Yuan did not expect that he had lost his mind to be this serious. The last person to appear had killed the other people in a deranged manner. If not for the fact that Hua Yuan's true body was special and could not be erased or replaced, he would probably have died. He had been in a daze previously. Today he finally appeared, but he did not expect his student to die. Hua Yuan knew that he had committed a grave sin. He could only confess to his student after he died. He did not expect that no one would believe him even after he spoke the truth. These brainless idiots even stopped him from committing suicide. Was he committing suicide? He was doing justice on behalf of the heavens. As long as he died and this body died, that dangerous person would not appear again. "Let go of me." "No. Military advisor, you must calm down." "Military advisor, we are also very sad that the young master has died. But you still have to help the Lord achieve hegemony. You cannot commit suicide." Xichang's Empress concubine, she suddenly felt that it was not unreasonable for Hua Yuan to be so arrogant. Look, in order to clear himself of suspicion, this person really used all his strength. The wound on his neck was still bleeding. If the crowd had not stopped him just now, Hua Yuan would have probably slit his throat when he recommended himself. Xichang's Empress concubine watched the show in a daze. Chapter 1668. Opportunities were fleeting. They could not be missed. Hua Yuan's main body took advantage of his student's death to temporarily regain consciousness. He had wanted to commit suicide and end all his troubles, but he did not expect to be stopped by the crowd. How could he fight against so many people alone? After a series of struggles, his sword was taken away and his mouth was gagged when he tried to bite his tongue. All his energy was in vain and he ended up in a sorry state. He was filled with grief and indignation. He finally understood what it meant to be begging for death but unable to live. Hua Yuan only wanted to die. Why did everyone act as if he wanted their lives? Why were they fighting so hard? After a stalemate, Hua Yuan was exhausted. His arms and legs were weak and powerless and he could only gasp for air through his mouth. Seeing that he did not have the energy to court death, the others secretly sighed in relief. Even though they did not like Hua Yuan, Cui would lose an arm if Hua Yuan died. Their interests would be tied to Cui's. To put it simply, protecting Hua Yuan was protecting their own interests. Naturally, they had to try their best to stop him. You guys are unreasonable." Hua Yuan's head was spinning. Waves of dizziness and nausea washed over him. This feeling was too familiar. Before he lost consciousness, Hua Yuan felt a pair of murky red eyes open in the darkness. The owner of this pair of eyes was looking at him coldly. There was no sadness, no joy, no shock, no anger, but Hua Yuan felt as if he was being stared at by the nine hells. No, perhaps it was not a hallucination. The owner of this pair of eyes could really drag people into hell when he went crazy. Hua Yuan's heart trembled. All the hair on his body stood up in protest. He knew that that person was about to wake up. The advisor has fainted. Someone shouted. Only then did the crowd realize that Hua Yuan's face was pale, and his eyes were closed as he leaned back. He looked more like a corpse than the one on the bed. The crowd pressed him down, called into Hua Yuan's ear and sent for a doctor. After all this, they were all drenched in sweat. It was as if they had run several kilometers with 100-kilogram sandbag on their backs. Heaven did not disappoint those who worked hard. Their efforts were still useful. Before the doctor arrived, Hua Yuan slowly woke up and opened his eyes. Someone said, "Military advisor, the current situation is critical, and we still need you to put in effort to plan. How can you abandon the Lord for the young master?" The old official who had wanted to kill Xichang's princess concubine had also calmed down. He said a few words and did not continue fighting. They sincerely persuaded Hua Yuan to give up on the idea of dying, but the person in question had a look that said, "Are you all pigs?" "I'm fine." Hua Yuan propped himself up on his weak legs and noticed that there was some sort of sticky liquid on his neck. He raised his hand to wipe it off and brought it before his eyes to take a look. It was actually bright red blood. He curled the corners of his lips mockingly and said indifferently, "The young master has just passed away. Prepare the funeral rites and send someone to inform the Lord. The cause of young master's death is not honorable. To the public we will say that he suddenly died of a serious illness." When everyone saw that Hua Yuan had regained his composure, they could not help but feel relieved. Even if Hua Yuan's expression was deathly still, it was still better than drawing his sword and seeking death at the slightest provocation. As long as he didn't want to kill himself and sacrifice himself for his master, everything was fine. "Yes. Yes, your majesty." Just like that, the curtains fell on the farce. A doctor hurried over to treat the wound on Hua Yuan's neck. Hua Yuan did not move at all, allowing the doctor to do as he pleased. He was like a lifeless porcelain doll. When the doctor saw this, he thought that Hua Yuan had failed to sacrifice himself for his master and was disheartened. He sighed and said, "You must avoid eating for the next few days. Your wound must not come into contact with any filth to prevent bad luck from entering your body and causing your wound to swell and rot. I will prescribe some medicine for you. Take it regularly and you will get better." Hua Yuan asked him, "Is the wound deep?" The doctor replied, "It's not deep, but the location is dangerous." Hua Yuan remained silent when he heard that. However, the emotions that flashed in his eyes made the doctor's heart palpitate. "You may leave. I want to be alone and rest. I still have to arrange the young master's funeral rites later." Hua Yuan chased him away. The doctor's lips quivered, but he did not say anything to dissuade him. He could only leave quietly. The moment the doctor left, Hua Yuan flicked his sleeves and knocked everything in sight to the ground. His elegant and handsome face was filled with malevolence. "I'm not a lunatic, I'm not. I am me." He suppressed his roar in his throat. Even though his voice was not loud, it was extremely penetrating and infectious, causing the hair of those who heard it to stand on end. Unfortunately, he was the only one in the room. No one else could hear him. The chaotic night was dispersed by the morning sun. The news of the young master's sudden death from an acute illness spread everywhere as if it had wings. This news naturally reached Chui, who was at the front lines. Chui received 2 letters. One was a normal funeral announcement, and the other was a secret letter that Hua Yuan had kept under wraps for a long time. This secret letter described in detail how the young master had bullied his pregnant concubine mother, causing her to have an unstable pregnancy and almost losing her child. Apart from that, Hua Yuan also added the truth of the young master's death. He had not died a sudden death. Instead, he had committed suicide out of fear after doing something wrong. The 2 letters arrived one after the other. When he read the first letter, Chui felt grief and indescribable joy at the same time. His adopted son had died, and the stumbling block that had been weighing on his heart was gone. No one could stop his biological son from ascending to the throne. When he read the second secret letter, Chui's anger shot through the roof. The veins on his forehead swelled up and down, as if there were green snakes coiling around his forehead. He was so angry that his hands were shaking, his face was ashen, and his chest rose and fell rapidly. He wanted nothing more than to dig out his stepson and whip his corpse. He had bullied and humiliated his concubine mother while he was away, causing her to have an unstable pregnancy and almost have a miscarriage. And Cui did not know that he had actually raised an ingrate who could not be tamed. He had actually done such a shameless, treacherous thing. Well done. These 3 words were almost squeezed out through his molars. When he thought about how his woman, a woman who was pregnant with his child, had been tainted by his stepson, an intense feeling of humiliation surged into his heart, causing his hatred to shoot to the heavens. Committing suicide out of fear of punishment? That was too easy for this brat. At the very least he should be executed by 1,000 cuts. Despite his anger, and Cui could not spread the word about what his stepson had done. Similarly, he could not reveal the truth of his death to the public. Not only could he not, but he also had to clean up the other party's mess and ensure his reputation after his death. If he did not do this, the outside world would inevitably speculate that his stepson's death had been incited by Cui, that he had harmed his stepson in order to clear the way for his biological son. This would inevitably leave behind a negative impression that Cui was vicious and merciless, that he would do anything to achieve his goals. More importantly, the world would also know that Cui had been cuckolded by his stepson. For a man, being cuckolded was the most unbearable humiliation. For the sake of his own reputation, Cui could not act on impulse. At most he would use some small methods to vent his anger behind the scenes. Chapter 1669. After all, he was someone who had climbed to the position of a feudal lord. Cui had his flaws, but he also had his merits. He couldn't be killed with a single blow. Not to mention what the unfilial son had done that violated human ethics. The impact his death had on Cui was not something that could be summed up by being cuckolded. With his death, Cui had no heir. His only bloodline was still germinating in the belly of the Xichang princess. The officials didn't know whether the child was a boy or a girl, or how talented he was. Everything was unknown. They couldn't help but feel anxious. Cui had an heir. This was the only advantage he had over Jiang Pingji. Now that the heir was dead and Cui was much older than Jiang Pingji, his remaining advantage was gone. Thinking of this, Cui felt pain and sorrow. He couldn't help but pull out the corpse of the Nanman tribe that he had exterminated. If the Nanman hadn't rebelled and overthrown Nanxing, he Cui was a man with both a son and a daughter. How could he have fallen to such a miserable state? When he thought of the scene of his children losing their lives in the Nanman tribe, he was so grief-stricken that he couldn't speak. Hatred grew wildly in his heart like weeds. Perhaps his luck had been too bad recently. Bad things happened to Cui one after another. First, 200,000 dawn of rations were plundered by Jiang Pingji. Then his stepson bullied his stepmother and committed suicide to escape punishment. Following that, Hua Yuan almost killed himself for his master. This wasn't the end. Their enemies also increased their attacks in tacit understanding, causing Cui to be badly battered. The rations issue hadn't been completely resolved. The news of the rations shortage spread like wildfire. The morale of the soldiers at the grassroots level was greatly shaken. Cui was still a scumbag. He looked for Lu Jing when he needed something. Little did he know that Lu Jing only wanted to curse. Did he really think he was a fairy? Could he conjure rations out of thin air? If he could, he would be the first to conjure rations to drown Cui. Lu Zheng's anger burned fiercely, but anger couldn't change anything. The crisis before him was getting more and more intense. Therefore, Lu Zheng could only give Cui an ultimatum. He wanted Cui to urge Hua Yuan to replenish the rations as soon as possible. If he couldn't, everyone would starve to death together. How infuriating! Even a cup of cold water couldn't extinguish Lu Zheng's anger. Too many things had taken up Lu Zheng's energy recently, so he forgot that his schoolmate was a troublemaker. Jiang Pingji and Lu Jing were both students from Langyi Academy. They were alumni of the same school, so they were naturally in the same camp. With a little effort, Jiang Pingji could make the relationship between Cui and Lu Jing, which was on the verge of collapse, take a turn for the worse or even completely collapse. From what she had seen, Cui was not a broad-minded person. His position and opinions were different from Lu Zheng's, and the two of them often had conflicts. This could be seen from the fact that Cui had placed Hua Yuan in an important position over the past 2 years, while Lu Jing had been given the cold shoulder. Cui had a lot of opinions about Lu Jing. If Jiang Pingji added fuel to the fire and sowed discord between the two, she might even be able to use Cui to force Lu Jing into a desperate situation. Lu Jing was not someone who would sit and wait for death. If that really happened, he might even jump ship at the last minute. Hence, when Wuxia saw his lord bending over the table and writing a letter to his classmate, Lu Xing, his heart was filled with mixed feelings. Because Jiang Pingji did not hide her letter from Wuxia could see the lingering sentences in the letter. Almost every word recalled the time when he was studying at Langyi Academy. Jiang Pingji used simple but intimate words to exaggerate the friendship between them into 100%. Those who did not know the truth would wonder if Lu Zheng and Jiang Pingji had such a close relationship when they were young. Wuxia recalled Chui's temperament and felt more and more sorry for Lu Zheng. How many lifetimes of bad luck did this man have to have a lord like Chui and an opponent like Jiang Pingji? Before he sympathized with Chui, Wuxia also had to sympathize with himself in his previous life. He and Lu Zheng were in the same boat. Based on Xiaoyin's temperament, it's impossible for him to accept my lord's invitation. Wuxia could not help but remind him. Lu Zheng was a petty and vengeful fellow. She had offended him greatly, so it would not be easy to recruit him in the future. And Chui's temperament is very different from Lu Zheng's. The two of them are not on the same path. Even if my lord did not interfere sooner or later, there would be discord between them. Why did my lord go through all this trouble? Not all lords in this world are as broad-minded and perceptive as I am, Jiang Pingji said narcissistically. And Chui has never been a gentleman. He doesn't walk the same path as Xiaoyin. I wanted to use Chui to force Xiaoyin into a corner and force him to leave Chui sooner. Time has dragged on for too long. I don't have the time to waste with Chui, this clown. Coincidentally, there was a problem on Chui's side. It was the perfect time to make them fall apart in one go. Don't you think that Xiaoyin is too much of an eyesore? Wuxia was speechless. If Lu Zheng heard Jiang Pingji's words, he would definitely cry, wouldn't he? Jiang Pingji continued, you and I both know Xiaoyin's ability. Letting him stay by Chui's side won't do us any good. Wuxia coughed softly and said, although it's the truth, my lord's way of expressing it is still unacceptable. To be honest, Wuxia had been rather jealous of Lu Zheng for a period of time. Lu Zheng could approach her without any ill feelings and talk to her freely, but Wuxia could only stand outside the safety line and watch. He could only experience all kinds of bitterness on his own. No one could confide in him. Jiang Pingji didn't know what Wuxia was thinking about. She only smiled and said, there's only Zi Xiao by my side. Xiaoyin isn't here. Can you still repeat what he said? Even if he knows what I said, he can't have any opinions. In the future I will be his master and he will be my subject. Wuxia said, this is a good ending. In the previous life, Lu Zheng's ending was too tragic. If this life was perfect, it could make up for the regrets of the previous life. If Lu Zheng knew about the conversation between the adulterous couple, he would most likely be so angry that he would jump up in rage. Was there anyone more shameless than them in this world? As it turned out, there wasn't. Jiang Pingji was a textbook scoundrel. No one could compare to her. When Lu Zheng saw the letter that Jiang Pingji had written for him appear in Chui's hands, there was only one thought in his mind. That bastard was up to mischief again. It wasn't that Jiang Pingji hadn't written letters to Lu Zheng before. Not only did she write them herself, but she also sent Feng Ji to persuade him. Unfortunately, Lu Zheng's beliefs were firm and unwavering. This time Jiang Pingji gave him a strong dose of medicine. The contents of the letter were as ambiguous as one could imagine. More importantly, this letter appeared when Chui had just suffered a defeat. Chui's expression was as solemn as ink. Does Xiaoyin have any explanation? Faced with Chui's questioning, Lu Zheng was furious. It's just a clumsy method of sowing discord. It's not like it hasn't happened in the past. Is my lord going to doubt my loyalty based on this alone? Lu Zheng couldn't be bothered to defend himself. Every time Chui doubted him, his good impression of Chui wore away. Chapter 1670. In the face of Chui's calm questioning, Lu Zheng's reaction seemed to have a deeper meaning. Why didn't he confess to Chui that Feng Ji had come to lobby him? Did Chui really not know? When Feng Ji had come, Lu Zheng had still been thrown to the side by Chui. Was he crazy or stupid? Why did he confess? Lu Zheng looked at his lord calmly. He had put in years of effort and energy for this man, trying his best to maintain this relationship between the lord and his subject. In the end, all he got in return was vigilance, suspicion and suppression. Lu Zheng was already in this state. How could he prove his loyalty? Did he really have to imitate his predecessors and stab a dagger into his heart, dig it out and let Chui take a look? How ridiculous. Chui attracted most of the attention. The real culprit, Jiang Pingji, was not so annoying. Fang Ji was my classmate and friend when I was young. He had a personal relationship with Lu Shi. He didn't serve Lu Shi. At most, it was a personal relationship. I didn't say anything about Fang Ji because I didn't want my lord to misunderstand and hurt Fang Ji. Up to this point, Lu Jing was still calm and composed. He wasn't embarrassed or flustered at all after being exposed. He was even calm and composed enough to speak frankly with assurance and composure in front of Chui. He enunciated each and every word to excuse himself. Moreover, I've never intentionally concealed the matter regarding Fang Ji. My lord doesn't trust me, but can you not trust Hua Yuan? He knows about Fang Ji, but he didn't tell you. Why doesn't my lord think about it? Lu Jing couldn't help but mock himself when he said this. He and Hua Yuan didn't get along, but now he had to use him as a shield to dispel Chui's suspicions. It was really ridiculous. He knows that Fang Ji came to you? Chui frowned slightly. He hadn't expected Hua Yuan to be involved. Lu Jing nodded. Yes. When Hua Yuan went to the manor, Fang Ji was still there, but he didn't say anything. Hua Yuan was a good shield. Indeed, most of Chui's suspicions were dispelled. His original thoughts began to waver. Chui's expression softened, but Lu Jing couldn't help but close his eyes. He didn't want to see Chui's reaction. He didn't want Chui to see his disappointment. Chui muttered to himself, "Why didn't he tell me? Perhaps he thinks that Fang Ji is harmless, or perhaps he thinks that my loyalty to you is unquestionable, or perhaps he thinks that this is something that can be used against me in the future." As Lu Jing spoke, the mockery on his face intensified. Which one does my lord think it is? Lu Jing's question was rather blunt, and he even seemed to be reprimanding Chui to his face. Hearing this, Chui was secretly dissatisfied. "Xiaoyin, are you blaming me?" Chui asked despite knowing the answer. Hearing this, Lu Jing sneered inwardly. Complain? He, Lu Jing, had suffered so many grievances, but in Chui's eyes they were merely complaints. He now regretted his blindness back then. Even Jiang Pingji, that unreliable and fickle woman, was more reliable than Chui. Chui was truly a fighter among scumbags. He took it for granted that he would be able to enjoy the blessings of having two wives. With his left arm around Hua Yuan and his right arm around Lu Jing, the two strategists would hold hands and become good brothers. For his great cause, they would do their utmost until the day they die. All personal conflicts must be put aside, and he could not neglect the public for personal reasons. He said, "From what you said just now, you seem to have a deep misunderstanding of Hua Qing. Both you and he are upright people who uphold justice. Why would he use underhanded tricks to frame a colleague? I heard that the two of you were at odds in private, but I didn't expect you to be like water and fire. Xiaoyin, both you and he are my right-hand men. You are like my lips and teeth. Although there are conflicts between our lips and teeth, we depend on each other and support each other." Lu Jing was speechless. Could Chui stop talking when he didn't know how to speak? He was about to vomit from Chui's analogy. Damn it, Hua Yuan and I are like lips and teeth. Forget it, forget it. With Chui, the peerless scumbag, serving as a foil, Jiang Pingji, the scumbag, could even claim to be his favorite, the white moonlight. Lu Jing said, "My lord, do you really not know about the conflict between me and Hua Yuan?" Chui furrowed his brows and said, "I've heard about it occasionally, but I don't think Xiaoyin is the kind of person who would delay public affairs because of a personal grudge." Lu Zheng's previous personal image was too bright and lofty. Not only Chui but everyone else took it for granted that Lu Zheng would sacrifice his personal grudge for public affairs. They had completely forgotten that Lu Zheng was human, not a saint. He also had emotions and desires. He couldn't be selfless. After Lu Zheng heard this, he felt especially tired. Even though Chui had met with misfortune in his middle age, the habits he had developed in his early years had long been deeply ingrained in his bones. After his recovery, he had forgotten what it felt like to be a human being in fear and trepidation. He had regained the confidence of a high and mighty aristocratic family. He had completely forgotten what scruples were, and he wouldn't empathize with Lu Zheng's difficulties. Chui's question just now was very inappropriate. He was blatantly accusing Lu Zheng of abandoning public affairs for personal reasons and purposely making life difficult for Hua Yuan. Lu Xing concealed the disappointment in his heart. He bowed and cupped his hands. His tone was calm as he said, Lu, she used such a despicable method to frame me and incite discord in my lord's trust in me, but I can't produce strong evidence to prove my innocence. This is my fault. Regarding Feng Zhi's matter, it was indeed my lack of consideration. In order to avoid arousing suspicion, I'm willing to ground myself and hand over my military power. I'll decide what to do after the truth comes to light and I'm proven innocent. And Cui was dumbfounded when he heard this. He did want to denounce Lu Xing for his crimes, but after saying it out loud, the balance in his heart leaned towards Lu Xing. He regretted being overly suspicious. However, Lu Xing had made things very clear and didn't give him a way out. No matter what Cui thought, Lu Xing couldn't be bothered to figure it out. He ground himself and didn't care about anything else. On the other side, Jiang Pingji was still persistently writing letters to her old classmate. She would write a letter when there was a war, when there was no war, when she was in a good mood, when she was in a bad mood. Wei Ci wiped off his cold sweat and watched as his lord stretched her legs on the brink of having her legs broken by Lu Xing. Isn't my lord afraid that doing this will dispel Cui's suspicions? Cui was Wei Ci's former lord. He knew him very well. Once he made up his mind, his lofty heroism was very bewitching. Back then Wei Ci was willing to leave his mountain and follow Cui not only because he was moved by his sincerity, but also because of his trust in him. In his lord's words, Cui was the head of multi-level marketing. He was very good at selling promotions. If Cui let down his guard and trusted Lu Xing again, Lu Xing might have a change of heart. After all, he was the man he had chosen. He had to assist him even if he had to kneel down to make the impossible possible. Even if the other party was a pile of sh*t, there would always be strategists who wanted to carve him into a flower. Unfortunately, Lu Xing was such a person. Chapter 1671. Other than Cui, no one knew what had happened between him and Lu Xing. They only knew that Lu Xing had been sick since that day, and Kong Xintong was in charge of serving tea. Outsiders thought it was just an excuse, and Cui also thought that Lu Xing was pretending to be sick. Who knew that Lu Xing was really sick? Very seriously. Kong Xintong watched as Lu Xing lost weight at a visible speed. She was so anxious that she cried, but there was nothing she could do. Godfather, the doctor said that this is a mental illness. Ordinary medicine can't cure it. The depression in his heart was difficult to dispel. To put it bluntly, Lu Xing had fallen ill from worry. Lu Xing lay motionless on the bed. It wasn't that he didn't want to, but his body was weak and his mind was muddled. As his illness worsened, he often couldn't remember things. He didn't even remember what he had said a second ago. In the eyes of outsiders, his sickly appearance was quite strong. His eyes were sunken, his lips were chapped, and his bright eyes were like the eyes of a dead fish. There was no trace of his former elegance. Cui came to visit twice. Each time he only stayed for a short while before leaving with a sigh. A few days ago he even asked about Lu Xing's illness. When he heard the doctor say that it was caused by a mental illness, Cui realized something and stopped asking. Why should he continue asking? Cui was a proud person. He knew that Lu Xing's illness was caused by his dissatisfaction with him, so why would he seek trouble? Lu Xing drank medicine for a few days and his illness was under control. He stayed awake longer and longer, but his spirit was still weak. Kong Xintong took care of him seriously and didn't ask him to do anything big or small. This filial piety was rare. Lu Xing said, I was just angry and couldn't get over it. When I get over it, my illness will naturally get better. Kong Xintong asked, outsiders say that Godfather is wise and resourceful. What else in this world can make you feel bad? Lu Xing said, how can I take the flattery of outsiders seriously? There are many things that I can't get over. For example, Lu Xing raised his hand to push up the band that had slid down from his forehead. He sighed and said, for example, you spent a lot of money to buy a raw stone and treated it like a treasure. You carried it with you every day and spent years carving and polishing it. On the day you succeeded, you thought it would be the most dazzling jewel in the world, but someone told you that there were as many latrines as you wanted. Kong Xintong shivered. She felt that her foster father was scolding her. Lu Xing said faintly, no matter who it is, they will most likely take things too hard when they encounter such a thing. Kong Xintong wanted to say something but hesitated. She was hesitating between selling it or not. Your daughter feels that, since it's a stone from the latrine pit, It's filthy and dirty. Why not throw it away as soon as possible lest it's an eyesore? Lu Jing said, I can't afford to lose this face. Kong Xintong. So foster father was suffering because he wanted to save face? Lu Jing said, Lu Shi to Zixiao, Huang Song to Yumo, Su Bei to Wenbin and Cui to your father. Kong Xintong asked in an untimely manner. Lu Shi, Huang Song and Su Bei. I know who they are, but Zixiao, Yumo and Wenbin are. For example, and Cui and his adoptive father. Could it be that both of them had the relationship of ruler and subject? Lu Jing said, My fellow apprentices, the four of us are all disciples of Master Yuanjing. We will never forget Master Yuanjing's kindness in knowing and educating us. However, Master Yuanjing is such a good teacher, but in the end he taught 3 blind students. I'm ashamed to face Master Yuanjing. 3 of his 4 disciples died in battle. This was the biggest stain on Master Yuanjing's teaching career. Kong Xintong counted with her fingers. The numbers were not right. Why are there 3? Lu Jing almost choked. Was this the main point? He endured his internal injuries and said, Wei Zixiao doesn't count. He had perfectly inherited Master Yuanjing's good point of having a good eye. Why else would people say that Wei Ci was cunning? Lu Jing could not figure out why Wei Ci chose Jiang Pingji. In the academy, the relationship between the two was quite cold. According to the news that Fang Ji brought, Jiang Pingji successfully had an affair with Wei Ci and ruined the most beautiful flower in Langyi Academy. What a beast! Kong Xintong responded obediently, but the corners of her lips could not help but reveal a smile. Lu Jing almost suffered an internal injury from holding back. He had forgotten that the little girl in front of him was Jiang Pingji's poison. She looked obedient on the surface, but who knew if she was crazy for her beloved disciple and banging her head against the wall for her beloved disciple? It's fine if she embarrassed herself in front of others, but it had to be that mischievous bastard Lu Shi, Lu Jing said gloomily. Look at what she did. Being a lord is really idle. She writes letters to sow discord all day long. How can she not know what kind of person An Cui is? Every letter is written just right. She says it's for me, but in fact it's for An Cui to read. If Lu Jing was not smart enough to retreat in order to advance, he might have been tortured to death by An Cui in secret. Jiang Pingji hated betrayal the most. Was An Cui generous to betrayers? Kong Xintong said, Then, what do we do now? Lu Jing said, Let's take it one step at a time. An Cui's rear is going to be in great trouble. I'm afraid they will collapse. Kong Xintong was shocked. I'm slow-witted. I can't see where the trouble is. Lu Jing reminded her of the key words. Rations. Rations? Kong Xintong repeated in a murmur. The general who was killed by An Cui out of anger was innocent. There was a problem with the rations before they were plundered. The person in charge of the rations was Hua Yuan. Looking at the overall situation, he was the only one who had the motive and ability to tamper with the rations. At this critical moment, An Cui's only adopted son died suddenly. It's hard not to suspect a conspiracy. An Cui refuses to listen to advice. He will die without a complete corpse. At this point, Lu Jing did not address An Cui as lord in front of his adopted daughter. Instead, he called him by his name. Kong Xintong said, Hua Yuan? What's in it for him to do this? Lu Jing said, How would I know what a lunatic is thinking? Then, aren't we in great danger? Kong Xintong did not like An Cui, but if An Cui was toppled, the father-daughter duo would be in a difficult situation. Lu Jing snorted. Lu Shi owes me a debt. Does she dare to burn the bridge after crossing it? A debt. Lu Jing said, You'll know when the time comes. Kong Xintong did not ask further after hearing this. The root of Lu Zheng's illness was in his heart. If he refused to get over it, it would be difficult for ordinary medicine to work. Because An Cui had courted death, Lu Zheng had given up. The latter watched coldly as he recuperated from his illness. As the battle escalated, An Cui retreated step by step. The rations predicament became more and more severe. Hua Yuan, who was at the rear, was slow. In addition, Jiang Pingji had sent people to interfere with the rations several times. An Cui was attacked from all sides. Why is it so noisy outside? Lu Jing closed the bamboo scroll and looked up to ask. Kong Xintong said, The rations have arrived. They've solved our urgent problem. Lu Jing frowned. His eyes revealed his deep thoughts. Godfather, we're having meat porridge for lunch today. Kang Shintong came in with 2 bowls of fragrant meat porridge. She picked up some pickled vegetables as a side dish. The meat tastes a little sour. Lu Jing picked up the meat porridge and took a bite. He seemed to have bitten into something. His expression changed drastically and he vomited. Chapter 1672. Kang Shintong was so frightened by this turn of events that she hurriedly put down the wooden bowl in her hands. With a clatter, some of the broth in the bowl spilled out as she moved, splashing onto the table. She couldn't care less about this and hurriedly went forward to support Lu Jing, who was pretending to vomit. Kang Shintong was already frightened out of her wits by this turn of events. She thought Lu Jing had been poisoned. Godfather. Godfather. Has someone poisoned the porridge? Kang Shintong thought of the broken relationship between her godfather and her lord, and Cui, and the irreconcilable conflict. Her first reaction was to suspect Cui of poisoning people. Anger burned in her heart. Lu Jing was still bending over and vomiting. Tears flowed out of the corners of his eyes. The corners of his eyes were dyed red, making him look more fragile. Kang Shintong could only pat his back to soothe his breathing. When he was about to vomit bile, Kang Shintong got up and brought him some water to rinse his mouth. Lu Jing vomited heavily. His expression turned from green to bloodless white. It's not poison. Lu Jing suppressed the nausea that rose up in his throat from time to time and took the water Kang Shintong handed him to rinse his mouth. Only then did he feel better. Kang Shintong's eyes were filled with surprise and fear. She asked timidly, "It's not poison. Could it be that the meat has rotted?" Lu Jing pursed his lips and didn't speak. But from his expression and gaze, this bowl of porridge wasn't as childish as rotting. Could it be? Kang Shintong had been raised by Lu Jing's side for a few months. Her horizons and knowledge had improved by leaps and bounds. Lu Jing's various reactions gave Kang Shintong a very bad feeling. She looked down at the things Lu Jing had vomited and scanned them with her eyes. Kang Shintong suddenly saw something. Her gaze almost froze. Before she could scream, Lu Jing's warm and broad palm covered her eyes. "Stop looking. Have someone come in and tidy up the things." Lu Jing's voice was slightly hoarse, as if he was suppressing something. Kang Shintong felt more at ease when she heard him. She took a few deep breaths and suppressed the sour taste that seemed to be rising up in her throat. She ran out without looking back. Lu Jing distinctly heard the sound of Kang Shintong vomiting outside the tent, and a sense of disappointment and mockery surfaced in his heart. He picked up a pair of chopsticks and fiddled with the vomit. A flat armor-like object rolled out with a small piece of bone attached to it. This was the foreign object that Lu Jing had just bitten. If he was not mistaken, this was clearly someone's little finger bone, and the fingernail was still on it. Lu Jing stared at it for a long time. Although he did not vomit, his face turned pale. Lu Jing was lost in thought as he sat on the bed. No one knew what he was thinking. He did not even hear the sound of Kang Shintong lifting the curtain and coming in. When he came back to his senses, he hurriedly hid the item. Unfortunately, he was a step too slow and Kang Shintong still saw it. "Godfather, the meat porridge that I mistakenly ate just now was actually mixed with human flesh, right?" Kang Shintong asked with a trembling voice. Her watery eyes were filled with panic and fear. "There are many dead in the war between the two armies, and Cui is short of rations and the supply lines are often obstructed. They are already at the point of running out of ammunition and rations. Hua Yuan is also secretly obstructing them from the rear. The people who are collecting rations mixed human flesh into the porridge and made it into minced meat. Doesn't seem unexpected. Shintong, did you see it?" Seeing that she had seen it, Lu Jing did not continue to hide it. Instead, he straightened his body and a bitter smile appeared on his pale face. He pointed at the half-cooked little finger and said with a complicated expression, "In troubled times we are at the chopping block, and those who are separated are meat on the chopping block. Be it in Cui or Lu Shi, in the end they are just people who are pushed by the world to struggle. The most pitiful are these people who can't even be buried in peace after their deaths. They have to be made into dried meat for the three armies to eat. We have to get rid of it." Kang Shintong's body trembled in fear. She thought that the scene she had experienced was the most tragic. That was until Lu Jing brought her to a dark alley for a stroll, which refreshed her view of the world. She thought that was the cruelest side of troubled times. Only now did she realize that this not-so-bloody scene in front of her gave her an impact that the former couldn't compare to. "Shintong, find someone to inquire about the source of this batch of rations. I want to see when this farce will end." Seeing that Kang Xintong was slowly calming down, Lu Zheng's expression softened a little. He instructed, "Remember, you must inquire carefully and don't alarm others." Kang Xintong nodded heavily. She went forward to clean up the 2 bowls of porridge and the vomit on the ground. Although the things were cleaned up, the memory that was deeply engraved in her mind was not so easy to forget. The more Kang Xintong didn't want to think about it, the more the little finger and the half-hanging nail swayed in front of her. It made her face pale and her spirit weak. After spending a lot of effort to inquire about the detailed information, Kang Xintong didn't delay and immediately informed Lu Zheng. She repeated clearly, "Godfather, I've inquired about the news. According to the rumor, Hua Yuan sent someone to inform us that the new rations will arrive in 3 days, but the army's rations are almost depleted." And Cui had no choice but to send people to the nearby towns to plunder the surplus rations of the commoners. Lu Zheng sat on the bed with his clothes draped over his shoulders. He couldn't help but sneer. "Ridiculous. Let's not talk about how many commoners there are in the nearby towns. Even if there were many commoners, the war last year affected the crops, and Lu Shi destroyed the spring plowing this year. The food stored in the commoners' homes isn't enough for them to last an entire year, much less the hundreds of thousands of soldiers under Chui's command." Kang Xintong said, "In the end, we had to use extraordinary means to gather a batch of rations. If it's not enough, we have to make up for it with human breasts." Kang Xintong frowned when she said the word human breasts. She looked like she wanted to vomit. Compared to Kang Xintong's reaction, Lu Zheng was much calmer. It wasn't that he was more accepting than Kang Xintong, nor was it that he was cold-hearted. It was just that he had seen more things. Human breasts were not rare in history books. There were even records of people trading their children for food and cannibalism. More than 10 years ago, the 4 factions of Nanman had wreaked havoc on the commoners of Nanxing. Wherever they passed, not even a blade of grass would grow. Wherever they went to war, they would burn, kill, and pillage. Similarly, they would eat people wherever they went. The allied army of Nanxing had conquered Nanman and plundered countless spoils of war. At that time, the relationship between Lu Zheng and Cui hadn't completely fallen apart. At most, there was some conflict. The latter knew that Lu Zheng liked books, so he organized all the books and spoils of war he plundered and threw them all to Lu Zheng. Later, Lu Zheng stayed at home and organized the books out of boredom. After sorting them into different categories, he unintentionally discovered a gourmet guide written by a scholar of a different tribe in Nanman. He named it Cannibal Rhapsody. It wasn't very literary, but every word he wrote made the reader's hair stand on end. Chapter 1673. A baby's flesh was brittle and could not be boiled for too long. Baby girls were the best. Children's flesh was tender and cooked to a certain extent. Ginger garlic rice wine removed the fishy smell. Boys were the best. Adults' flesh was sour but chewy. Men's lean flesh was especially outstanding. Women had more white flesh and were slightly greasy. They were suitable for human oil. The flesh of old men was unbearably stinky and sour. It was tasteless. Only human bones were boiled into soup with spices. The soup was rich and fragrant. Apart from these, the author had also tried unborn fetuses in women's wombs. There were fetuses every month. The entire Cannibal Rhapsody had less than 500 words, but each word was filled with the greatest malice and evil in the world. After reading the Cannibal Rhapsody, Lu Zheng's desire for peace grew stronger. He had staked everything on Cui, hoping that such a tragedy would not happen again. In the end, Cui disappointed him again and again. Cui and Nduishi could not bear Lu Zheng's ambition. Kang Xintong sobbed. "Human breast. How could they make them?" Lu Zheng said calmly. "That depends on the situation." Kang Xintong was shocked by the information revealed in Lu Zheng's words. Her red eyes widened. She called out hesitantly, her voice trembling, "Foster father. If Cui was a wise ruler, there would naturally be people who would stand up and take the blame for the matter of mixing human breast milk as army rations." Lu Zheng sighed. "We are not the other tribes. They are unscrupulous and cannibalism is a common occurrence. But we are different. There are some things the other tribes can do and we can't. Using humans as food to fill one's stomach, even if it's an expedient measure, is an act that goes against human ethics. It's extremely cruel. Not only will it be criticized by the world, but it will also be reviled by future generations. Even so, it depends on whether it's worth it." Kong Xintong's voice was as soft as a mosquito's. Foster father, you mean? Lu Jing said, if we're really at the end of the line and Chui is worthy of being reviled for generations. Human breasts are also worth it. He didn't care about using human breasts as army rations, but that Chui wasn't worthy of others taking the blame for him. This was Lu Zheng's worldview. It wasn't just him. Many strategists were the same. After Kong Xintong heard this, her body slightly trembled. It was unknown what kind of battle was going on in her heart. If you think it's cruel, wait until these matters are settled and you can stay in the inner courtyard until you are of age. I will find a good marriage for you. Lu Zheng's expression was calm as he said, Hua Yuan said that the provisions will arrive in 3 days, but this person's words cannot be trusted. He is not loyal to Chui and even has the ambition to murder and replace him. 3 days later, the rations would still be nowhere to be seen. Lu Shi has secured his victory in advance. Even though Lu Jing thought it absurd, he had to admit that his classmate was more suitable than Chui to be the ruler of the world. It was time for this dispute to come to an end. Kong Xintong said, will foster father turn to Duke Lanting in the future? That's right, she cares a lot about him. Value? It was hard to say. Lu Shi's personality was hard to predict. It would not be an exaggeration to say that she was moody and temperamental. She had tried to recruit him time and time again, but each time she had tried to sow discord and scheme. Who knew what her true intentions were? Was she really trying to recruit him or was she just putting on a show? Lu Zheng was a sensible person, but he also thought too much. It was easy for him to get into a dead end. He continued, however, I'm not senior brother Qing Yumo. If Chui really loses, he'll lay low for a while. He'll most likely make use of his relationship with Langyi Academy to become an official again. Qing Yumo? The senior brother that foster father mentioned before? Lu Zheng said, he is a gentleman. His temperament is different from mine and he is more thorough in his thinking. He is good in every way except for one thing. He is too selfless. Ever since Huang Song was defeated, there was no news of Yumo and he stayed at home. Of course, he did not choose Huang Song. He considered many things, mainly for his senior brothers and Master Yuanjing. He did not want to implicate them. Kong Xintong did not understand. How can it be implicated? Lu Jing said, if you carefully observe the officials under Lu Shi's tent, you will find out how powerful Langyi Academy is. Duke Lanting may not care about this. It doesn't matter if there is one more or one less. Kong Xintong thought that her idol would not be so narrow-minded. She doesn't care, but Yumo won't. The other people from Langyi Academy won't either, Lu Jing said helplessly. There are few gentlemen in the world, but there are many petty people. Langyi Academy is not a pure land. Master Yuanjing cannot guarantee that the students he teaches will be decent gentlemen. There will always be people who rely on their relationship with Langyi Academy and do whatever it takes to climb up. This is not what the teacher and senior brothers want to see. But they can only restrain themselves and not others. The more Kong Xintong listened, the more she felt that something was wrong. If Lu Jing thought that Qing Jing, who avoided arousing suspicion, was a gentleman, did he not consider himself a villain? Qing Jing chose to avoid arousing suspicion, but Lu Jing said he wanted to become an official. Foster father. Lu Jing said, everyone's choice is different. There is nothing to criticize as long as you have a clear conscience. Kong Xintong also said, if so, I am also willing to follow you. I will never be a bird in the inner chamber. Lu Zheng's lips curled up into a faint smile. Good. Because of the human breast, Kong Xintong and Lu Jing did not have the appetite to eat that day. They could not stop the soldiers from eating this batch of provisions. They could only guarantee that they would not eat it. Tomorrow, I will find an excuse to take you out of the military camp. And Chui was destined to kneel either in the hands of Jiang Pingji or Hua Yuan. Lu Jing did not want to be buried with him. Besides, the provisions of the military camp could not last for 2 or 3 days. After the ammunition and provisions were exhausted, and Chui might not be able to control the situation. Lu Jing cherished his life. He did not want to die before he saw the world at peace. Kong Xintong nodded. She raised her hand and soaked the hard flatbread in the hot soup. Otherwise she could not bite it at all. Lu Jing ate 2 bites and put it down. He let Kong Xintong eat the rest. Just as Lu Jing had expected, the provisions promised by Hua Yuan did not arrive. Everyone raised their heads in anticipation, but they did not see the grain team. The people sent to receive the grain team fell into the enemy's ambush. The enemy gave them a head-on blow. They were beaten until they did not know which way was north. When Chui received the news, he was so angry that he fainted. The main culprit, Li Yun, led the soldiers in his tent back to the camp happily. He thought that this was an ordinary meritorious service. He did not expect that his lord would give him a great merit. The enemy's scale was not large and their combat power was not strong. Li Yun was practically suppressing them without any pressure. He did not expect that he would make a great contribution. Chapter 1674. Faced with Li Yun's question, Jiang Pingji remained silent for a second. Neither. Li Yun was even more puzzled. He could be considered an old official who had followed Jiang Pingji to conquer the world. He knew very well the gentleness and patience hidden under the cold, calculating surface of his lord. Li Yun casually asked, "I don't deserve a reward if I haven't done anything. Naturally, it is my honor for my lord to reward me. However, I do not deserve this military merit of unknown origin. My lord, why don't you explain it to me so that I know where the credit comes from?" Jiang Pingji couldn't help but roll her eyes at Li Yun. She joked, "You can't figure it out? If you can't figure it out, I'll take back the credit." "Don't, master." Seeing the cooked duck fly away, Li Yun's expression immediately dropped. He had an extremely disappointed look on his face. Jiang Pingji didn't have to look to know that the bullet screen in the streaming room would be full of "Little Angel Han Mei touch me, little angel Han Mei don't cry, ow ow ow, how can a little angel be so cute? Streamer, I advise you to be kind, don't bully my little angel." One had to admit that Li Yun did have the capital to rely on his beauty and cuteness. He had perfectly inherited the good features of his parents and had always been one of the plastic surgery templates for male stars in the entertainment circle in Salted Fish's world. Even though he was approaching his 30s, his face hadn't changed much from when he first saw him. The older people get, the less attractive they look. But the older Li Yun got, the more attractive he looked. When he smiled brightly, he looked like a sunny and healthy Prince Charming. He was good at both literature and martial arts, handsome and cute. Once he put on a straight face, there was no need for him to pretend to be aloof. His temperament also made him look dignified without being angry. He was a cold and aloof Prince Charming. The key was that he looked slender, but the muscles under his clothes made people want to vomit blood. Such a contrast made the group of salted fishes love her even more. Of course, salted fishes were a group of mystical existences. Some claimed to be Li Yun's mother fans, some claimed to be his career fans, some claimed to be his girlfriend fans. What was even more mystical were the poison junkies. Jiang Pingji had seen a couple articles on the bullet screen about the cute and sunny Han Mei and the cold and aloof General Li Yun. The slogan of this group of fans was that they couldn't get Li Yun. If others couldn't get Li Yun, then let Li Yun suffer the consequences of his own actions. Jiang Pingji was speechless. There was simply nothing to say. Under the strong request of her fans, Jiang Pingji was magnanimous and did not continue to make things difficult for Li Yun. "I'm just kidding. Do I look like someone who goes back on his word?" Jiang Pingji had always treated the generals who came from the military very well. Even if the military expenses were overspent every year and she had to use her private treasury to make up for it, she never mentioned cutting the military supplies. She was even more generous with the generals who could be of use. She never lacked rewards during the New Year and other festivals. This habit had been going on for so many years. How could it be possible to cheat and blackmail Li Yun's military merits? She said sternly, "Does Han Mei know who the troops you led attacked?" Li Yun saw that Jiang Pingji had become serious and could not help but retract his smile. He said in all seriousness, "I don't know about that." Jiang Pingji was dumbfounded. "If Chui heard what you said, he would most likely vomit blood in anger." "Why?" Li Yun asked when he did not understand. Jiang Pingji said, "You ambushed them by chance. You didn't plan it beforehand, but Chui and the others didn't know about it." It was precisely because it was unintentional that it was even more infuriating. Li Yun's luck had always been good. This time he had relied on his strength and luck to deal a heavy blow to the shaky morale of the enemy troops. Unfortunately, it was not Li Yun's intention. It was just a coincidence. If Chui knew about this, wouldn't he be so angry that he would jump up in rage? If it was more serious, he might be so angry that he would have a cerebral hemorrhage. Li Yun could not understand Jiang Pingji's bad taste. He straightforwardly stabbed Chui in the back. Even without this incident, and Cui wouldn't have been able to jump around for long. How can his failure be attributed to bad luck? To put it bluntly, Cui's strength was insufficient. Why was he talking about luck as a fig leaf? Jiang Pingji held back her laughter and said, Han Mei's words are quite reasonable. Cui was in urgent need of military rations, but Hua Yuan, who was at the rear, intentionally delayed. Coupled with Jiang Pingji's precise attacks, Cui had lost more than he won in the past 6 months. He was swallowed up by Jiang Pingji every few days. In the past 6 months, Cui had lost a considerable amount of territory. The front lines suffered successive defeats, and the supply of military rations was intermittent. In the end, they could only mix human flesh with military rations to delay time. They never expected that the large amount of rations they had high hopes for would not arrive on time. The troops sent to receive the rations were even intercepted and killed by Li Yun and his men. One could imagine the heavy blow to their morale. If not for the fact that they were in different camps, the salted fish in the livestream would sympathize with Cui. Zhuodamani manicure. Sai, which elder named Bossen Cui. He really spent his entire life trying to explain how unlucky the word Cui was. Even though he later chose the word Duoshi, he still could not change his fate in this lifetime. Although I'm a hardcore fan of the streamer's camp, seeing how unlucky his opponent was, I could not help but want to climb over the wall to sympathize with him for 3 seconds. The salted fish had long been displeased with Cui's name. Which elder would give their child the name Cui? Cui meant worry. He was destined to be unlucky for the rest of his life. Meng Meng de Xiaobai too, and Cui with the word Duoshi. This naming style was quite common in ancient times. For example, Lu Guo with the word Gaoji. The meaning of a name is the opposite of the word. It is both a warning and a restriction, but also a blessing. Of course, looking at it now, Cui's name was indeed not well chosen. Fu Qi Duo Duo. The level of education of the father's generation can be seen from their names. Lu Shi with the word Lanting, Li Yun with the word Han Mei, Feng Jin with the word Huayu. Which one of them was not pleasing to the ear, beautiful in writing and perfect in meaning? However, Cui was a maverick and was destined to fail. The salted fish complained to their heart's content. Anyway, only they and Jiang Pingji could see the bullet screen. Cui could not see it, so what was there to be afraid of? Indeed, Cui could not see it. So, was this the only consolation they had? Why haven't the rations been delivered yet? Even if Cui trusted Hua Yuan so much, when Hua Yuan did not perform well and endangered his life and ambitions, all his trust in him collapsed. Although there was an enemy ambush along the way, how could such a small ambush intercept the rations team? When Cui was dissatisfied with Hua Yuan, he disliked him in every way. He wished he could drag him in front of him and roar at him. Unfortunately, Hua Yuan was at the rear. It was extremely inconvenient to communicate between the two places, let alone pursue Hua Yuan's responsibility immediately. Cui's anger rose. The civil and military officials in his tent were also at their wits' end. It was not that they were incompetent, but even the cleverest housewife could not cook a meal without rice. How could they fight a war without rations? Of course, in the early stages when there was sufficient rations, they did not gain any advantage from Fu Wang and the others. Now that there was a shortage of rations, they had even more reasons to find excuses for their defeat. At that moment, an official who was on good terms with Lu Jing stepped forward and said, "Has my lord ever suspected Hua Yuan?" Chapter 1675. Your Highness, why don't you think about it? When Advisor Lu was in charge of the army provisions, he never made such a huge mistake. Ever since Lu Jing had been frozen, all sorts of problems had popped up. Cui didn't want to hear this. If he acknowledged Lu Zheng's ability and denied Hua Yuan, wouldn't that be slapping him in the face and admitting that he didn't know people well? In Cui's opinion, Hua Yuan's ability was not inferior to Lu Zheng's. However, they specialized in different fields and couldn't be compared. The official didn't have mind-reading skills and naturally didn't know what Cui was thinking. Advisor Lu has been assisting you since you were insignificant, Your Highness. He's been diligent and conscientious all these years, never slacking off for a single day. Your Highness, why don't you think about all the battles you've fought all these years? When did there ever be a problem with provisions? He continued, not noticing that Cui's expression had darkened. On the other hand, Hua Yuan made such a huge mistake this time. Advisor Lu also said that Hua Yuan had disloyalty and was especially wary of him. And Chui said, "The most important thing now is how to get through this, not shirk responsibility." "What's the point of saying all this?" The official choked on Chui's words. It was Chui who had reprimanded Hua Yuan first. He hadn't started this topic, but now it was his fault? He wanted to defend himself, but someone tugged on his sleeve, indicating that he should return to his seat and stop arguing with Chui. Regardless of whether Hua Yuan had a problem or not, it was unwise to raise doubts now. Not only would it draw hatred to Lu Zheng, but it would also indirectly question Chui's ability to judge people. Your subject misspoke. The situation was not in his favor. After bowing, the official silently returned to his seat. Everyone continued to be gloomy. They weren't immortals and couldn't make food appear out of thin air. They'd already scavenged most of the provisions nearby. They could only hope that Hua Yuan would quickly replenish the supplies. Who knew that Hua Yuan would stand them up? Not only did he stand them up, he didn't even give them an explanation. More than one person muttered in his heart at this scene. Was there really nothing wrong with Hua Yuan? Was this guy really not a spy sent by the enemy? Or perhaps Hua Yuan really didn't want to rebel? The atmosphere in the tent froze for a long time. No one could think of a solution. At this moment, a report came from outside the tent. Chui's face was dark as he asked. Chui asked with a sinister look in his eyes, "What is it?" The soldier handed over a bamboo tube with both hands and said, "Before military advisor Lu left, he told me to give this to the Lord." Before leaving? Did Lu Jing leave the barracks? When did this happen? Why didn't they hear anything? Some of them looked confused, but Chui knew, because he was the one who allowed Lu Jing to leave the camp. Lu Zheng's condition worsened. If he continued to stay in the barracks, he wouldn't receive good care. It was very likely that he would die of illness in the barracks. Chui didn't want to be known as a heartless person, so he agreed to LV Zheng's request and sent him to a village dozens of miles away to recuperate. This wasn't a big deal. Of course Chui wouldn't publicize it. What is it? Chui had someone present the item. He opened the lid of the bamboo tube and took out a neatly folded piece of paper. He casually swept a glance and immediately got up from the mat in shock. It was impossible to count on Hua Yuan to deliver food, but Chui could set his sights on the enemy granaries. It was not that no one had mentioned this suggestion before, but the feasibility of implementing it was too low because they did not know the location of Jiang Pingji's granary. It was also impossible to count on a sneak attack on the granary to make Jiang Pingji unable to recover. Everyone in the world knew that Jiang Pingji was a crafty person with 3 burrows. She would never leave her military supplies in one place and wait for the enemy to plunder them all at once. However, if they knew the location of the enemy's provisions, even if there was only one location, they could temporarily solve the food crisis if the raid was successful. Chui didn't expect the sickly Lu Jing to leave him such a huge surprise before he left. However, after his ecstasy came hesitation and doubt. Lu Jing had been staying in his tent and hadn't left. Even if he was a divine strategist, it was impossible for him to know the location of the enemy's granary, right? If this information was true, why did he only bring it out now? Chui was hesitant, but the officials in his tent were very curious about what was written in the letter that made Chui react so strongly. Could it be a brilliant plan to break out of the situation? Everyone's hearts were pounding, but Chui didn't open his mouth to explain, so they didn't want to disturb him. Chui took a deep breath and made up his mind to make the letter public so that everyone could read it. My lord, this is a good opportunity. If the sneak attack was successful, they would be able to obtain a large amount of provisions, enough for the army to slowly retreat and plan their next move. This is good news, but why does the chief public security officer look unhappy? A few people with sharp eyes and bright minds guessed correctly. It was most likely that Chui's paranoia had flared up again and he was judging Lu Jing with biased eyes. When they thought about it, they really pitied Lu Jing. Hua Yuan had courted death with all his might, but Chui could speak up for him, while Lu Zheng was repeatedly doubted. Everyone thought so, but Chui didn't say anything, so they couldn't do anything. Because there was really no other way, Chui still took Lu Zheng's suggestion and attacked the granary at night. Little did they know, this was someone's scheme within a scheme. The burlap sack covering Lu Zheng's head was removed. The not-so-dazzling light made Lu Zheng's face look even gloomier. Before he could adjust to the light around him, he heard a call that he hadn't heard for many years. Xiaoyin, how have you been? Jiang Pingji's smug smile that hadn't changed much was magnified in front of his eyes. Lu Zheng's hands were tied behind his back and he was half sitting on the ground. His hair was messy and he looked pathetic. "Where's my daughter?" Even though they hadn't seen each other for many years, Lu Zheng recognized her as soon as he saw her smiling face. "So that girl is your daughter? She's a girl after all. How can she be treated like you?" Jiang Pingji squatted down and leveled her gaze with Lu Zheng. She smiled and said, "She's been tied up and placed somewhere else. I'm not a heartless person like In Chui. I won't be cruel to the family of my enemy. Speaking of which, your daughter is really pretty. She doesn't look like your child at all." Lu Zheng took a deep breath and tasted the pain in his stomach that he hadn't felt in a long time. He pretended to be calm and said, "Because she's my adopted daughter. I quite like that little girl. He treats you extremely well. She's still biting people even when she's tied up. She doesn't let anyone touch a single hair on your body." After hearing this, Lu Zheng's terrible mood eased a little. In this cold and heartless world, only his adopted daughter could give him some comfort. Jiang Pingji said, "More than half a year ago I asked Buku to pass a message to you, but you didn't reply to me directly. Are you trying to go back on your word?" "A message from Fangji?" Thinking of this, Lu Zheng's expression darkened. This guy had really slept with Xixiao. "He's just a prisoner. You can do whatever you want with him." Jiang Pingji sighed. "Everything was fine in the past. Xiaoyin, you're treating me like an outsider. You know very well that based on our relationship I can touch anyone but you. If you're not willing to submit to me, I'll set you free and let Master Yuanjing keep an eye on you." Lu Zheng gave her a sidelong glance. Only a ghost would believe her nonsense. "Where's Xixiao?" "I touched him." Jiang Pingji rested her chin on her hand and said, "Your touching is different." Lu Zheng couldn't take it anymore. "Lu Lanting, don't talk dirty at a time like this." Chapter 1676. "I haven't seen you in years. I missed you so much that I couldn't help but tease you." Jiang Pingji raised her eyebrows and chuckled. She untied the rope that bound Lv and tossed it aside. Lv shivered and his eyebrows twitched. His expression seemed to be on the verge of breaking down and enduring. He leaned back slightly to avoid her approach. Now that his hands were free, he couldn't help but rub his sore wrists as he said in a slightly uncomfortable tone. "Lu Lanting, do you still think of yourself as a 12 or 13-year-old? This was the military camp, not a brothel where she drank and listened to music. She could not be so unrestrained. If I walk among the crowd, it's an exaggeration to say that I'm 12 or 13-year-old, but I can still say that I'm 15 or 16. Jiang Pingji teased him with a smile. "If I remember correctly, you're about the same age as Xixiao, but you look much more haggard than he does. People will believe you if you add 10 years to your age. Anqui is a troublesome person. You've helped him clean up his mess all these years, haven't you? You wake up earlier than the chickens, sleep later than the dogs, and do more than the oxen. You really live up to the saying, sleepless all day and night, wasted in the morning." Lv looked up at Jiang Pingji. In a trance, he had the illusion that time and space were in disarray. The person standing in front of him was still the noble youth in brocade clothes. It was as if the person in front of him had stayed in the past. More than 10 years had not left a mark on her. Your mouth is still as unforgiving as ever. You always like to pester others endlessly." When she was 12 or 13, she was pestering others endlessly. That was called naive, cute, and innocent. More than 10 years had passed, but she was still pestering others endlessly. He was not Wei Zixiao. Why would he indulge her? "I'm arguing with reason. I'm presenting facts and reasoning. Since when was I pestering others endlessly?" Jiang Pingji extended her hand and said, "My tent is indeed clean, but the mud is dirty. How long do you plan to sit on the ground? Aren't you afraid of the cold?" Lv looked at her hand and tried hard to suppress the urge to slap it away. "You're a scholar. I've taught you for 3 years. I didn't teach you to talk about Anqui every day." Jiang Pingji could not help but laugh. "I thought you would say something like, 'You're a girl after all, don't be so vulgar.'" Even now, there were still people who liked to make an issue out of her gender. Even if it wasn't intentional, they would still subconsciously pull out her gender. Jiang Pingji didn't mind because they were all outsiders and outsiders that she looked down on. If Lu Zheng was like this, she would be very disappointed. Lv raised his eyes to look at Jiang Pingji's face. She was wearing a short, round-collared robe that was made of stone. She still looked capable and neat as usual, coupled with her handsome face, affectionate eyes and half-smile. At first glance she looked more like a young man from an aristocratic family with a romantic temperament. There were no feminine labels that people were familiar with on her, such as delicate and lovely, dignified and generous. But it was undeniable that she was indeed a woman, and she embodied another kind of rare beauty of women. "Don't you know what you look like?" Lu Jing admired her in his heart, but his words were unforgiving. He grabbed Jiang Pingji's hand and stood up with her strength. Because LV Zheng was still sick, he felt dizzy when he suddenly stood up and he almost fell forward. Jiang Pingji helped him up. LV Zheng tilted his head to look at her profile and he muttered to himself. He hadn't recognized her gender back then, not because he and the people around him had made a mistake, but because she looked too good. "Did An Chui not give you meat to eat for the past 6 months? When they shook hands, she realized that LV Zheng was slimmer than she had expected. His palms were almost devoid of flesh. Zishao was also thin, but some flesh could be squeezed out. LV Zheng, on the other hand, was a bag of bones. More than half a year ago, Jiang Pingji sent Fang Ji to persuade LV Zheng. Fang Ji returned in low spirits, but he also brought Jiang Pingji a lot of news. According to Fang Ji's description, LV Zheng had been frozen by An Chui, but his situation wasn't very bad. He ate, drank, slept well and even put on some weight. Looking at him now, he wasn't fat at all. If there was a typhoon outside, she could tie a rope around LV Zheng's neck and let him fly in the sky. Don't mention meat. It's nauseating. Even though he didn't swallow the meat porridge, he tasted it. Every time he thought about it, it made his stomach turn. After a short period of dizziness, LV Zheng stood up straight and let go of her hand. He observed her secretly. Just like Jiang Pingji's narcissism, she hadn't changed much over the years. Previously, LV Zheng had rejected Fang Ji's persuasion. LV Zheng didn't agree to recruit him, but he also took the opportunity to catch up with his classmate. The two middle-aged men who were already in their 30s, gathered together to chat by candlelight and reminisce about the past. They sighed with emotion and also talked about the situation of the Langya F5 Heavenly Group. From a teenager to a young man to a middle-aged man, everyone except Jiang Pingji had changed beyond recognition. The shy and lofty Fang Ji had been tempered by reality into a steady and dignified country teacher. The hot-bloodedness that had been boiling in his chest during his youth had been defeated by reality. Jiang Mo, who was addicted to 2D paper dolls and loved all kinds of fire-repelling maps, and had a slightly cowardly personality, had become a profound, introverted and reliable clan leader of the Shi family. He, who had been noisy and refused to submit to his family in the past, had also followed the example of his parents. Ma Xiu, a wealthy gentleman with good farmland and no worries about food and drink, had been affected by the chaos of war. His farmland had been occupied and plundered by bandits who rose to power. In order to avoid disaster, he had no choice but to move his family north. There had been no news of him for many years. Of course, the three of them hadn't changed much. Among the five, Jiang Pingji and LV Zheng had changed the most. Jiang Pingji, who was the most hedonistic and mischievous, had become a vassal of the world. LV Zheng, who had the potential to be a nationalistic youth and was biased against the gentry, had become Jiang Pingji's strategist for the safety of her family. Now he had become Jiang Pingji's prisoner. Life was really interesting. No one knew what their future would be like until the very last moment. Hey, I won't talk about it anymore. Jiang Pingji's observation skills weren't just for show. She could tell from LV Zheng's reaction that he was hiding something. Naturally, she wouldn't continue to provoke him. An appropriate amount of playfulness was called playfulness. Excessive playfulness was called enmity. Look at your sickly and haggard appearance. It's better to stay in the military camp and wait for the war to end. Recuperate. Maybe I'll let you see your old master for the last time. After Jiang Pingji finished speaking, she suddenly remembered something. Right, I have something to tell you. LV Zheng was well aware of Jiang Pingji's arrangements, so he wasn't surprised. However, what she said made LV Zheng a little flustered for no reason. What's the matter? Jiang Pingji said, I asked for something from your adopted daughter. LV Zheng raised his eyebrows and asked, what is it? Jiang Pingji said, your study notes. What do you want that for? Chapter 1677. Send his former master back to heaven? Lu Jing didn't know what to do for a moment, but he was smart enough to figure out what she had done in no time. Lu Lanting. Lu Jing pointed at her. He was so angry that his hand was trembling. Jiang Pingji had a smile on her face. She raised her hand unhurriedly and pushed his hand aside. What are you trying to say? Are you despicable? Or are you cunning? She laughed. There's nothing too deceitful in a war. On the battlefield, all kinds of scheming methods were allowed. The only thing that mattered was who was more skilled. I'm just taking advantage of the situation to achieve my goal. Moreover, I'm giving you a credit so that you can quickly gain a foothold here. Lu Jing said, do you think I, Lu Xiaoyin, am a fickle and petty person who forgets about morality for the sake of profit? Lu Jing knew what Jiang Pingji had done. It was definitely a trap that could bury Cui alive. I've never doubted your character, but a fine bird chooses a tree to nest in, and a virtuous official chooses a master to serve. Do you not know what kind of person Duoshi is? Whether he's worthy of you hanging him with a piece of white silk? Jiang Pingji said confidently, if you're a foolishly loyal person, just pretend I didn't say anything. Whether you stay or leave, I'll let you choose. Jiang Pingji naturally wanted to recruit Lu Zheng. No one would complain about having too many talented people. After a while she would conquer Nanxing and rule over the 5 countries in the world. She would need more and more people. Lu Jing knew her background, so he felt more at ease using her. He treated the surrendered officials of Langyi Academy well, and she was an alumnus of Langyi Academy. This was double insurance. Master Yuanjing had taught at Langyi Academy for many years. He had students all over the world and made friends with many famous scholars. With double insurance, it would be much easier to recruit people from this circle in the future. Jiang Pingji naturally would not fall out with Lu Jing due to all these reasons. You're forcing me to betray Cui. Lu Jing had voluntarily given up on Cui and Jiang Pingji had forced him to do so. She had even made him the scapegoat for betraying Cui. Even if Cui was a scumbag, Lu Jing had chosen him. Even if it was a stone in the latrine pit, Lu Jing didn't want to be forced to throw the stone back into the latrine pit. Jiang Pingji said, how can this be considered as coercion? What I'm doing is a stratagem, a normal confrontation of schemes. If no one in Cui's camp sees through it, even if they fall into the pit and die, it's their own fault. We can only blame ourselves for being too weak and stupid. How can we blame the enemy for being too strong and smart? Lu Jing took a deep breath and asked, what did you do to imitate my handwriting? Even if LV Jing did not like to praise Jiang Pingji, she would open a dye house just because he gave her some color. LV Jing had to admit that she deserved to be envied by the heavens. She had a talent for imitating others. Based on what Jiang Pingji had just said, it wasn't difficult to deduce that Jiang Pingji must have taken the books he had written recently. Based on the handwriting on them, she imitated the letters to lure Cui. As for LV Jing was not sure what the contents of the letter were and what trap Jiang Pingji had dug. Jiang Pingji said, oh, I'm helping him come up with strategies and share his burdens. Isn't Cui severely short of rations recently? There's a problem with the logistics rations and the frontline army is facing the crisis of running out of rations. How can they fight a war when they don't have enough rations? So I imitated your handwriting and tone and came up with a simple idea. I asked him to lead his troops to attack my granary. I was worried that he wouldn't be able to find the way, so I specially drew a simple map. LV Jing closed his eyes after listening to her. This was a fatal blow. How could Cui take the bait? Jiang Pingji asked in return, why not? Xiaoyin, do you have any misunderstandings about your own weight? You're Master Yuanjing's student, a top student who graduated from Langyi Academy. You've assisted Cui, a penniless stray dog, to accumulate the wealth you have today. Even if Cui has given you the cold shoulder over the past 2 years and even detested you, he will instinctively trust you when he's in a life-and-death situation. Without your assistance, LV Xiaoyin, Cui would still be a small character leading a few thousand grassroots troops. How could he have the glory he has today? LV Jing had helped Cui launch a counterattack once, so he could naturally help him launch a counterattack a second time. Jiang Pingji said, Xiaoyin, I imitated your handwriting and wrote a wonderful plan. It's bait. How could Cui not take the bait? LV Jing was reluctant to admit it, but he had to admit in his heart that Jiang Pingji was right. Cui had been forced into a dead end and Hua Yuan was still stabbing him in the back. He had no other choice but to believe in the plan. Of course, Chui was a cautious and suspicious person. He might not believe everything. Aren't you afraid of going for wool and coming home shorn? You failed to ambush Chui and you'll lose your granary? Why did LV Jing, Qingjing and the others have a problem with Jiang Pingji? Did the students of Langyi Academy not think highly of this schoolmate? Purely from the perspective of character, Jiang Pingji was a rather likable person. Even if she was the most despicable, she knew her limits, which became her unique shining point. However, making friends and assisting a vassal were different. The criteria for judging the two were also different. Friends could be mischievous, but the Lord could not. LV Jing did not know how Wei Xi and the others tolerated it. For example, this time, she used her own granary as bait to lure Chui. If the other party counterattacked, Chui would not be afraid of anything, but what about her? Jiang Pingji revealed a somewhat weary and mocking smile. Xiaoyin, you're underestimating me. I dared to set a trap, so naturally I have something to rely on. She asked in return, have you ever seen a banker lose? LV Zheng's heart skipped a beat. This chaotic world has lasted for too long. It's time to end it. We'll start with Nanxing, then Zhongzhou. Once we take down these two countries, the remaining two are nothing to fear. Those who once looked down on me and hated me can only watch me ascend to the throne. It's quite satisfying to think about it. LV Jing knew that Jiang Pingji was not joking. What does this world mean to you? We're all old classmates. I won't say pretty things like, let the people live and work in peace and contentment, and clarify the chaotic world. Anyway, you can tell that I'm lying. Jiang Pingji said, as for me, I want those who are dead and alive to open their eyes wide and see who's qualified to be the ruler of the world. Those who aren't convinced should hold it in. At the same time, I'll open their eyes and see what the real golden age looks like. Apart from me, none of them can do it. Not only will the predecessors be left in the dust, but the successors will also not be able to catch up. LV Jing spat out 2 words softly. Arrogant. His ambition was written all over his face. Jiang Pingji made a gesture of shaking off her cigarette smoke. She smiled and raised her eyebrows. Xian, I'll give you a warning. LV Jing was speechless. Even though he did not know what a warning from Zhenxiang was, he had a feeling that it would not be anything good. Recuperate well. I'm going to meet an old friend. Chapter 1678. I'd like to see Zixiao. Jiang Pingji didn't find Lu Zheng's request excessive, so she agreed. Anything else? My adopted daughter likes you very much, but she had a rough childhood and has a strange temperament. If she offends you in any way, please forgive her and ask the soldiers under your command to treat her better. Lu Zheng pondered for 3 seconds and said hesitantly, she's a child with a hard life. Jiang Pingji's gaze revealed some surprise. She thought Lu Zheng would say something else, such as rebuking her or asking about her attitude toward Chui. She never expected him to plead for his adopted daughter. Jiang Pingji didn't pay attention to Kang Xintong at first, but since Lu Zheng said so, she naturally had to take care of her. She paid more attention to her. I'll send someone to send her to you. You can supervise her together and save some manpower. Jiang Pingji's words sounded impolite, but LV Jing knew what she was really trying to express. Kang Xintong was Lu Zheng's adopted daughter, so she took care of him more meticulously than others. She placed Kang Xintong under his watch so that Lu Zheng wouldn't worry about his adopted daughter's situation when he was sick. Jiang Pingji arranged for Lu Zheng to recuperate in a secluded place. She also reminded the doctor not to be stingy with medicine and to use whatever was useful. When Wei Xi heard the news and rushed over, Lu Zheng was wearing a greenish-gray cloak and kneeling in front of the chessboard playing chess. Sometimes he furrowed his brows in deep thought, sometimes he was suddenly enlightened, and sometimes he pointed at the chessboard to calculate something. He didn't look like a prisoner at all. Wei Xi saw that Lu Zheng looked sick and said disapprovingly, I heard that you're very sick. Why don't you wait on the bed? Instead of resting, he was playing chess. Any doctor who encountered such an uncooperative patient would be angry. Lu Zheng had long heard Wei Xi's movements. When he heard Wei Xi scolding him, he looked up at him. You haven't changed much over the years. Lu Zheng placed the chess record by his side and gestured for Wei Xi to sit on the mat opposite him. Wei Xi almost didn't recognize him. Lu Zheng looked much more haggard than he imagined. He was in low spirits and his hair was visibly gray. There was not much of a difference in their ages, but when Wei Xi and Lu Zheng were compared, The latter seemed to be almost 10 years older than the former. Wuxia said frankly, "You look much older." Zheng had the urge to treat the chess piece as Wuxia and crush it. "One is marked by the company one keeps. One is blackened by the company one keeps." Lu Jing was implying something. Wuxia had been with Jiang Pingji for a long time. How did his glib tongue change toward the latters? Wuxia did not know about the bet between Jiang Pingji and Zheng, but he was good at reading people's minds. Zheng's words carried a subtle meaning. After hesitating for 3 breaths, Wuxia asked cautiously, "Does Xiaoyin know?" "It's hard not to know." Lu Zheng's fingernails were well manicured. At this moment he was playing with a black chess piece, which made his fingernails look even paler. He placed the chess piece in the designated position and said, "How could Lu Xi be worthy of your attention? Back then you were quite distant from her." After all, they were from the same sect and were taught by the same teacher. Lu Zheng's understanding of Wuxia was incomparable to that of an outsider. In the eyes of an outsider, they might think that Jiang Pingji was forcing Wuxia and that Wuxia had no choice but to succumb to her tyrannical power. However, Lu Jing understood that if Wuxia had no intentions towards others, he would not easily succumb even if a knife was placed on his neck, let alone using force. The two of them had an affair. It could only be said that both of them were interested in each other. Not to mention Jiang Pingji, Lu Jing had heard Jiang Pingji say that she would drag Wuxia down with her 800 years ago. But what about Wuxia? When did he develop feelings for Jiang Pingji that were beyond that of a ruler and an official? Wuxia said, "Maybe it was in my previous life." He told the truth, but Lu Jing thought that he was being glib. Instead of learning from the good, you learn from the bad. Are you learning from Lu Xi in your eloquence? Lu Jing gestured for Wuxia to choose a chess piece to play with him. Among his fellow apprentices, Wuxi's chess skills were the best among them. Lu Jing was ranked last and was often beaten by Wuxia, Qingjing and Han Yu. The shadows of his school days were Jiang Pingji and Wuxi's, playing a game of chess with their hands. He was always beaten badly. In order to avenge his previous humiliation, he put in a lot of effort in this aspect. He did not know if he could gain an advantage today. Wuxia was speechless. No one believed him when he told the truth. It was not easy to be an honest person. The two of them did not talk much. They just played 2 games in silence. Lu Jing still lost miserably. After cleaning up the mess, Lu Jing looked up at Wuxia, whose temperament was becoming more and more stable. He was like a pearl that had been polished until it became rounder. Although it was not dazzling, it could not be ignored. This person looked like a decent person. Who could guess that he had tons of evil ideas in his mind? "I will be careful about the matter with the Lord. I will try not to affect her as much as possible. I will also try to protect myself." He wanted to accompany her until her hair turned white and she died of old age. Both of them would be fine. Lu Jing nodded. "My teacher often says that you have your own views. Since you have said so, you must have made up your mind. It is not good for outsiders to persuade you." He was Wuxi's fellow apprentice, so his standpoint was naturally more biased towards Wuxia. As long as it was Wuxi's own choice, Lu Jing would respect it. But he could have chosen anyone to have a relationship with, but he chose Jiang Pingji, who was the most difficult to conquer. She was a vassal now, but she would become an emperor in the future. Her identity meant that if Wuxia wanted to walk to her side, there would be thorns under his feet. Maybe he would kneel halfway. "Thank you." Wuxi's words came from the bottom of his heart. Whether it was Lu Zheng, Qingjing or Han Yu, their respect and understanding warmed Wuxi's heart. Lu Jing stroked the cold chess piece and let out a sigh. He said to Wuxia, "I know that you have a soft temperament and some things can't be said openly. Since we are from the same school, I will say one more thing. Lu Xi's temperament is different from ordinary people. If you really want to be in harmony with her, remember this. Don't get involved in anything. In the future, whether it is the civil and military infighting or the struggle between the gentry and the common people, you'd better not intervene and don't express your opinion. If you really can't help it, it is best to ask for Lu Xi's opinion. Don't do anything that goes against her will. Ordinary couples have some difficulties and quarrels at most. But if you have a conflict with Lu Xi, it will affect more than just a small family." Lu Zheng's words were not only the way of a ruler and a minister, but also the way of a husband and wife. As long as Wuxia always stood by her side and supported her, their interests would be firmly bound. Harming Wei would be harming Jiang Pingji's interests. In this way she would become Wei Si's most powerful shield. Wei Si was stunned after hearing that. If he had understood this in his previous life, he would not have thought himself clever and got involved in the affairs of the Wei family. Would the meteorite have fallen from the sky? Most likely not.